Hello, I think I'm live. If you are joining in right now or watching the VOD, I chat about health issues and have people come by and hang out and ask questions about their health issues. But I'm going to give everybody several minutes to trickle in so we get a little bit of an audience going before we start. Usually start in about 8 to 10 minutes from this point. So if you are watching the VOD, you can skip forward until I start chatting. Thanks for stopping by. If you're not subscribed, please do so. You'll get notified of my streams. And you can also check me out at Nathan Guy Hatch on Twitter, where I do announce streams, sometimes like this with very short notice. Yeah, hope everybody's having a good holiday season. I'm excited for Christmas. Make sure my stream is actually working. Yeah, it looks like everything's good. You guys can hear me. You are here? So I also tend to start out by talking about the topic I'm going to talk about, but you guys can feel free to chat and ask questions as much as you want. I'll try to get to them. I usually get to the bulk of questions at the end of what I'm focusing on. But we can talk about anything you want, especially during the beginning. Hey, 911. Good. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. How are you doing? Are things going well for you? You having a good holiday? I'm great, thank you. I actually have a chicken stock going on my stove right now, so my entire apartment smells like carrots and onions and chicken broth. Oh, it's just fantastic. It's such a classic, like, Christmas smell. I love it so much. I'm just making homemade chicken noodle soup from it. But just homemade chicken noodle soup, though, that's not the right way to characterize that. Homemade chicken noodle soup is just like one of the best things ever, and I make such fucking good chicken soup. It's I can't wait to have it. But I'm not putting it all together today. Today I'm just making the broth and the stock, and then tomorrow I will be making the actual soup for Christmas Eve dinner for myself. Very, very excited about it. I also have a cake going. I've been formulating a lot of recipes because I'm going to do a cookbook, but it takes a really long time to put that together. And is also really expensive to do. But so I've been formulating recipes to add into it, and one of the two of the recipes actually, or maybe even more, are going to be yeasted cakes. Yeasted cakes are so fucking delicious. You know, if you made, yeah, I think it's me neither. Unfortunately, it won't be. I mean, I would like it to be soon, but just because I don't have a very large audience right now, that makes it more difficult. Because I don't know that I would be able to sell enough copies to fund it. And plus the amount of work that it takes to put together is just enormous, you know. I have to like write and formulate all the recipes and photograph maybe a lot or most of them, and then printing and cookbooks are way more expensive to print than than my primary book, with full color and glossy pages and hardcover and stuff like that. So it's probably not going to be anything anytime soon, unfortunately. But I'm working on having yeasted cakes in there, because they are so delicious. They're way okay. So if you've probably maybe made cakes, right? Or if you haven't, you've seen people do it. And when you make cakes in with modern methods, like using baking soda and other chemical leavening agents like that, which there's nothing wrong with them at all. They're great for you. But they they'll fall a little bit in the center when they come out of the oven, and the cakes can dry out pretty easily. None of that happens when you use yeast to make cakes. When you use yeast to make cakes, they stay puffy and tall and airy and moist, and oh gosh. And then because the yeast also, and obviously my recipes don't use common wheat, which the gluten in that is inflammatory and unhelpful, and common flour is usually fortified with added iron as well. So the flour is either spelt or einkorn, but the yeast, because the yeast ferments and breaks down the flour, and the yeast produce more flavors and B vitamins in there. So when you eat a yeasted cake, it has a lot better flavor profile, and is also more nutritious for you, because while common flour would have some B vitamins in it, the action of the yeast rising the dough or the batter produces all the B vitamins that yeast produce, and so you actually get a much healthier product, and it tastes better, and it holds together better, and it's moister. It's just fucking fantastic. So anyway, I wish I could share those with you guys sooner, but I'm still formulating it, and of course have to make the book. So, but maybe eventually they'll be out sometime soon. Yeah, a lot like a baked donut, 911. Yeah, same kind of concept. So donuts, light and fluffy and moist, and they're yeasted, so the donuts actually have a lot of B vitamins in them. Hey Phallus, thanks. Nice to see you. I haven't seen you for a little while. Yeah, I mentioned this a lot when I'm talking about bread and yeast and stuff. So there's a whole chapter in my book called Niacin Therapy that talks about the importance of niacin and the end product of one of the end products of niacin in our body called NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, which is really important for cellular respiration and other metabolic pathways, basically shuttles electrons around in our body. And when you are low in NAD, your metabolism drops. Excuse me. And this is actually quite relevant for cancer as well. Anyway, NAD, the function of NAD. And which is why in my book, in the cancer chapter, I also recommend using a supplement of niacinamide daily. But everyone thinks that we crave bread because it's high in carbohydrate, but that's not true. I think rice is probably one of the least craved carbs. Even though rice can be delicious, no one's really usually oh my god, I need rice right now, but our brains will do that with bread. Your brain will I would kill for a slice of bread right now, and it's not because of the carbs. I would also, and sweet potatoes, or not potatoes themselves, because potatoes actually because potatoes contain solanine, which is a glycoalkaloid toxin in them that actually stimulates the nervous system. One of the reasons we crave French fries is because they actually increase your neurological function through a stress pathway, though. So there is also a chemical craving for potatoes. But normal carbs, like we can crave carbs, but bread has very special craving, properties. And the reason for that is because yeast produce a very special form of niacin. Normally, dietary niacin takes something like 4 enzymatic steps to be converted into NAD. But the kind of niacin that yeast produce, it's called nicotinamide riboside. It only requires 1 enzymatic step to be converted into NAD. And so when you crave bread, what you're actually craving is the nicotinamide riboside that is in it. And from the yeast activity, and that helps to raise your metabolic rate, and that's the reason why we crave bread. It's not really actually the carbs, even though the carbs are part of it, but because we all crave carbs, but bread specifically we crave because of the nicotinamide. And there's as far as I know, there's no other dietary source in all of nature that you can get nicotinamide riboside. It's now available as a supplement, although you don't really need to use it. Like niacinamide works great too. That's why we crave bread, because it's not available in our diet. It has, except from yeast. Oh, which also would, so like wine and beer also would contain nicotinamide riboside. So that's like why you also might if you're of age, you might crave beer or wine because the yeast action in them makes a lot of B vitamins, and beer and wine are actually really high in B vitamins because they're not filtered and stuff like that. So anyway, I think we've been waiting long enough, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So I wanted to talk about cancer because I actually had a new coaching person, coachee, who signed up a little bit ago that had cancer, and I realized I haven't done a cancer stream yet, even though that's like one of the big focuses of my book. I've helped several people with cancer, but directly in coaching programs, but not so much. I mean, because I don't have a really wide audience anyway. And then in addition to that, like I do know of several people who have used my book to help treat their cancer rather than just like signing up for coaching. And all of them are all alive still. My book has been out for like 8 years. For instance, and just to give you an example, and if you're unfamiliar with my book, I had cancer. I'm not entirely sure what cancers I had, and yes, plural, but I had tumors on my thyroid that had a very high probability of cancer. For instance, I had at least five tumors on my, and normally they're called nodules, but that's if they're not cancerous. They're called nodules. One of the biggest, there were 2 large tumors on my thyroid, and one of them was on the isthmus, which is the center fleshy connection between the 2 lobes of the thyroid, and that's basically like 100% rate of cancer. Like you don't get nodes on the isthmus unless it is cancerous. And there's also a common misconception, and I think actually some jerk tried to like disprove that I had cancer, which is really weird because the only reason anyone knows that I didn't get it biopsied is because I say that in my book. It's not like I was like, pretending I got that's like the impetus for people who are critical of my work. And who also, frankly, are often homophobic and trying to discredit me just because they don't like me because I'm gay and I don't fit into their bioenergetic conception of morality that they often try to perpetuate. There's a common misconception with thyroid nodules that having a lot of them means you don't have cancer, and that's not true at all. There are specific studies that address this, and your risk of having thyroid cancer rises by 10% with each nodule that is there. And I don't even know how this sort of misconception got started, probably by the medical community themselves, because the medical community don't often actually rely on medical studies and scientific studies. A lot of medical And someone actually brought this up, and I can't remember who said this. It was he was an instructor at a prestigious university, and who's like well established in the field of I think he's an oncologist too and stuff. And he said that uh I could be wrong about that though, but I do know he's a big professor. But he said that biologists having a degree in biology is education, but having a degree in medicine is just training. And most medical traditions, they are just that. They are knowledge passed down from doctor to doctor through medical institutions, and they're not often actually informed by actual science. They're more informed by the quote unquote art of practicing medicine. And it's only been in the last few decades that medicine has been much more informed by science, but it still is hobbled by a lot of traditions and just like anecdotal experience by doctors who came before. I mean, and it wasn't even too long ago that doctors were still using leeches to treat disease, which also actually, by the way, does work. That's not a completely, old wives, hocus pocus anecdote. Removing blood from a patient can actually stimulate some healing pathways and lower excess iron burden and things like that. So anyway, so it's not all bad, right? But there are incorrect conceptions about cancer that exist in the wider medical community that actually work contrary to what cancer is and what it does and where it comes from. And so I was so happy to be diagnosed with these tumors on my thyroid though, because it finally explained why I was so sick. And I was so sick, and I had been so sick for so long, and I was only 34. I should not, being 34 and white in America, like I should not have the kind of health problems that I was having. I had access to plenty of food, good economic opportunities, supposed quote unquote healthcare. But since about 30 and 31, my health had been declining precipitously. And it had culminated in a large amount of weight gain, extreme fatigue, a total inability to sleep, just feeling this really intense irritation all the time. I had also developed a chronic cough for the last several years at this point. I'm 42 now, just for reference. So I got diagnosed with tumors on my thyroid 8 years ago, or maybe even almost 9 years ago now. Because I'll be 43 next year. So I was only 34 at the time. The cough later, after I got diagnosed with that, I thought that my cough was from the cancer. But what I found out later is that I actually have cystic fibrosis, and the cough was from immune dysfunction in my lungs with a chronic infection of the bacterium that does it is called Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and it's in chronic infection, actually causes coughing, but it was a lot more severe back then too as well. So I was really happy to get diagnosed with those, but it was also kind of scary too, because I didn't know what to do, and I also didn't have health insurance. I lost my health insurance at the time. I was getting it through Medi-Cal and through my partner, but then my relationship imploded at the same time. And once my partner found out that I had cancer, he left me. And I didn't even have a place to live, and I didn't have a job, and it was really unfortunate. And also, that was also at the same time I happened to also find Ray Peat's work. And I read everything that he had on cancer, and I started to learn how to treat mine with nutritional environmental changes, some medical strategies like using aspirin. One of the most really interesting parts about how cancer is approached and treated nowadays, and the history of cancer, actual real cancer research, is that there's kind of an extreme disconnect between the mainstream medical community's treatment of cancer and the historic biology science investigation of cancer. One of the biggest, cancer researchers was Otto Warburg, who discovered that cancer cells don't respirate. And that was an enormous because they use backup like modes of energy metabolism, and that really doesn't have any bearing in contemporary medical treatment of cancer. I don't even know if a lot of oncologists really, I mean, they'll know about it, but whether or not that's applied to actual treatment strategies is not relevant to them. Like chemotherapy and radiation have nothing to do with how cells respirate. So a lot of this medical knowledge hasn't actually been implemented into medical practice in the treatment of cancer. And a related substance is aspirin. Aspirin is a medicine that actually does promote cellular respiration. And back, 8 years ago when I was trying to treat my cancer and I had read about Ray Peat's work, and he had suggested that aspirin was therapeutic to cancer, and that there were studies showing that. So, and you can find them. There's some, if you just look up, in the national NCBI, if you do a search with aspirin and cancer, there are a lot of studies that show that aspirin helps treat cancer. There's one even very formative study that explored treatment with chemotherapy and aspirin, and the patients that were on aspirin had a significant rate of improvement and almost non-existent relapse of cancer, whereas the ones not using aspirin did not have that result. But even in that study, the aspirin was viewed as an adjunct to chemotherapy rather than the reverse, which was actually what the study was demonstrating. And this also demonstrates another danger of how, like, if you don't know how to read studies, it can be very harmful for your takeaway from them, because even the authors of studies will not understand exactly what the data is showing very often. And this study literally did not point out, even though it was exploring aspirin as an adjunct to cancer, it did not identify cancer being the primary agent of recovery in that study, because the people on chemotherapy did not fare very well at all. And the reason that the combination of chemotherapy and aspirin worked better is because aspirin promotes cellular respiration. It doesn't in all cases. You have to, like I talk about in my book, that you have to support increases in respiration with a lot of different nutrients and adequate carbohydrate intake and nutrients and other nutrients and stuff like that, and including sunshine actually is really important for our respiration pathways. And so a lot of the mainstream medical community doesn't know about this, and because of that, the news industry doesn't pick up on it either. So when you read articles and news and headlines on social media about cancer, they're usually really misleading. And there will be real clickbaity articles that are like, oh, scientists found a vaccine for cancer, or blah blah blah. And this has been happening for the last 2 decades, even before cancer was, even before, although actually social media is sometimes kind of a cancer, but even before social media became prominent, this same kind of clickbaity headline grabbing stuff was occurring in just normal news media. And so you'd be watching local news at home, and they'd have a news segment on how the cure for cancer is just 5 years away. And this has been happening for the last 4 decades. None of this is new. It doesn't go anywhere because it's not based on how cells actually work. It's really more based on this idea that cancer is itself a pathogen and has to be killed and destroyed out of the body. And while there are viruses and bacteria that can catalyze cancer, cancer itself is not a foreign invasive pathogen. Cancer is our own tissues and our own cells, and they're dysfunctional. And because the approach to cancer is usually only about cutting it out and killing it, it is often not very effective because it is our own cells, not an invasive pathogen. But actually, though, that's one of the reasons why chemotherapy does work, because there are actually, and we'll get into this further into the stream, there are actually bacterial species that directly contribute to the catalyzing of cancer. But chemotherapy and radiation will kill microorganisms in your body, including parasites. And so when you're going through chemotherapy, like one of the therapeutic, if it does work, one of the therapeutic reasons is not just because it kills the cancer, but because it actually is also killing a lot of invasive pathogens that are in your body. Whenever I have worked with cancer, people with cancer, and including myself, every single time we have contracted infectious gingival pathogens that cause gum disease. And everyone that I've worked with cancer has shown red bleeding and inflamed gums. And one of the reasons for that is that the pathogens that cause oral disease also catalyze cancer. Once your gums start bleeding, they actually get access to your cardiovascular system, and they circulate around inside your body, and they feed on collagen amino acids. One of the primary ones of that is called Porphyromonas gingivalis. And excuse me. And Porphyromonas gingivalis actually catalyzes a lot of different diseases. Like, it can be found in the brains of Alzheimer's patients, and it causes cardiovascular disease. But the enzymes that it produces to catabolize collagenous amino acids also impair cellular respiration, because they steal like glycine and sulfur and iron and zinc even, and copper, and all of these nutrients that are needed in cellular respiration pathways. So when you get a large enough colonization of these infectious pathogens, they easily and strongly impair cellular respiration. And the entire problem behind cancer is that cancer cells cannot respirate properly. And this was demonstrated in the work of WARBURG and others as well. I think Albert St-Georgi, I can't say his name ever. I think his work also demonstrated cancer principles like that as well. And that's the fundamental problem behind cancer, is that cells that become cancerous are not able to respirate properly. And as a side effect, they produce hormones and metabolites that further potentiate that inability to respirate. One of the reasons for this is that when cells are trying to heal, and tissues are trying to heal, they don't actually respirate. Respiration is actually suppressed a bit, or even a lot sometimes, in regeneration pathways. Part of this is because like the basic concept of cellular division, mitosis. Cells take up water in order to grow their size, and that stimulates mitosis, which is the division of cellular DNA, and then they split into separate cells. And the influx of water into a cell lowers its metabolic rate by diluting its electrolytes. And there's probably other regulatory reasons for that too. And so when cells are dividing and when tissues are regenerating, their natural state is less respiration. So if a tissue is unable to respirate properly in the first place, also because of deficiencies of nutrients, either caused by dietary insufficiency or environmental stress or pathogenic infection, or exposure to carcinogenic factors like radiation, like lots excess dental X-rays or excess airport screening X-rays, or radiological incidences. Those also interrupt cellular respiration pathways. And so when that happens and these cells can't respirate, it naturally stimulates healing pathways to try to regenerate those tissues so that they can respirate. But then they're not able to because of these deficiencies or interfering pathways. So then they keep regenerating and keep regenerating, and that causes more and more inappropriate tissue growth. And like one of the hormones involved in this is estrogen, and cancer cells always output high amounts of estrogen. And, you know, and I've mentioned in my streams before that people have negative opinions about estrogen because of misogynistic traditions that we have in our patriarchy-based societies. But there's nothing bad about estrogen. Estrogen is a hormone of growth. We would not grow if we did not have estrogen. That's why estrogen is involved in pregnancy, because you need estrogen in order to grow a fetus. But you also need estrogen to regenerate tissue and regrow tissue when you're injured. When you're maturing from a kid to an adult, there's estrogen is involved in all these pathways. And the reason that estrogen presents in cancer is because estrogen is part of the growth cycle of tissues. And cancerous tissue is basically tissue that is trying to regrow and generate, but is unable to because of environmental or nutritional restrictions. And so it stays in the regenerative growth phase indefinitely, which ends up growing tumors. So basically the metabolic deficit behind the development of cancer being a lack of respiration, doing the opposite, promoting respiration, is the key to curing cancer long term, either holistically on your own without traditional cancer therapy or with traditional cancer therapy. I don't recommend either one specifically. It's more what you want to do. But I got attacked once. I had someone once sent me a really nasty email that accused me of my work would cause like lots of people to die from cancer, as if lots of people already don't die from cancer all the time, and especially during and from traditional chemotherapy and radiation treatments. Like, and those when those deaths occur, they are not categorized as deaths from chemotherapy, even while they're in the middle of it. They're always categorized as deaths from cancer. But very often the chemotherapy can be extremely aggressive. One of my friend's moms, who very sadly died of cancer right while I was beginning all of my work and had this research, and I wasn't very forceful in trying to help her, and I probably should have. I gave my friend some resources, but I just wasn't insistent about it. Like, her mom went through, and I forget what kind of cancer she had. I think she had breast cancer. She was feeling really fatigued and tired all the time, went into the hospital, was immediately diagnosed with advanced cancer, and she went through like maybe 3 rounds of chemotherapy. No, 2. I think it was 2 rounds of chemotherapy that were not successful in very rapid succession. And the cancer had spread to her spine. And so then they did a chemotherapy where they injected a long needle directly into her spine and pumped her her spine full of chemotherapy drugs. And she died that week from it. And to say that traditional cancer treatment is effective or doesn't also contribute to the deaths of the patients is completely antithetical to how chemotherapy works. Like, the idea behind chemotherapy is that you use poisons to try to kill the cancer cells before you end up killing the actual person. But very often it actually also kills the person, because when you have cancer, you're metabolically very compromised. And your body is not able to handle the kind of toxicological stress. And it was really funny too, because when I got this email, like it was through my website, and it tracks IP addresses, and I looked where it came from, and it came from Johns Hopkins University hospital. So it was clearly sent, and it kind of the anger in it did seem like it was sent by somebody who worked in cancer, which is even more odd because that person would have also been witness to many deaths from traditional cancer therapy. Cancer treatment is not, there's some cancers that are easily treatable and many of them are not, and have high rates of mortality. So this idea that, like, you know, telling people how to eat properly to support healing from cancer would do harm is completely psycho and authoritarian. Like, you know, like nowhere in any of my work do I recommend that people avoid chemotherapy. What my specific stance on it is that if you incorporate my advice, it supports traditional cancer therapy, because, and in many cases, and I also say this too in my book, that if your cancer has grown substantially, you do have to get rid of those tumors. you can't, if your cancer is very advanced and you have very large tumors, it is very difficult to use nutritional approaches to resolve it. And and at the very least, you should have those tumors surgically removed. And chemotherapy works to help that as well, because it just kills those cancers through poisoning them. But if you go into that kind of treatment without healing your body with proper nutrition and promoting cellular respiration, treatment is much more traumatic and much less likely to be successful. So it's required that anyone with cancer usually has a bad diet and has exposure to pathogens and doesn't know any of this information. And then the doctors that you're getting treated by also don't know any of this stuff either, or at least it's not part of their approach to treating it. So my information is complementary to traditional cancer treatment, not in opposition to it at all. Several times I have heard from patients who go in to get traditional treatment, and the oncologists and nutrition advisors that are working with them are impressed by what those patients are doing. They're like, this stuff is great. There are a couple things that they don't want you to take along with some of those treatments, like vitamin K supplements, for instance, because that can cause like blood clots if you have certain conditions during treatment. So but generally like oncologists and nutritional advisors to cancer treatment usually are actually in support of these approaches. They do often very much understand what is going on in the health and diet of a person, but they don't necessarily have the resources or knowledge to specifically recommend what to do. So, because for instance, and if you've listened to any of my streams, you know that light is a very important nutritional resource, and a lot of people just aren't getting sun exposure, and no oncologist is going to tell you to go out and get sunshine. In fact, especially for skin cancer, they'll probably actually tell you not to. But that's not how skin cancer works either. So, So I rapidly got better, and I had thyroid cancer, but I also suspected for a long time that I actually had leukemia as well, because I had a lot of aching on my left leg, especially in the shin, and I had other symptoms that correlate with leukemia. Like I had this thing called hairy leukoplakia, which is on the side of my tongue, and I had it for years too. It first appeared when I was like 29, or probably about almost 30, like somewhere around 30. And it also didn't go away until probably I was 39, after I'd been doing a lot of this work for several years. And then it also turns out that when you have cystic fibrosis, you also have extremely high increased risks also of getting diabetes and leukemia. So it just made sense that was actually probably the case. And I also had skin cancer, which I also did not get biopsied, but I had a lesion on my back that never healed for like 10 years. I had that also. That appeared when I was like 27-ish. 28, and it got bigger by the time that I became I would kind of pick, it's kind of gross, but I would pick at it, and at first I just thought it was like a scab, like I got injured somehow or something, but it was just there and it just never healed. It would never heal. It was just like a omnipresent scab, and it got bigger around the time also that I was diagnosed with tumors on my thyroid, and it also got bigger until I was like 37 and 38, and then and then as I was doing more work on cancer and more work on the stuff on my book, it eventually started to shrink and get better, and then it would go through these periods where it would heal over and then reappear, and that really helped inform a lot of the information that's in my book. And I'll get to the reasons why, but vitamin K specifically had a very important was a very important factor for finally fully resolving that. And then it finally healed over about 2.5 years ago permanently, and has never returned. And now there's just like a kind of a brown, just like a light brown discoloration in that spot. it was not uniform in size. It was about 3/4 of an inch long and about 1/4 of an inch or half an inch wide as well. So it was a pretty substantial cancerous lesion, and I didn't get it biopsied because I was pretty confident that I wanted to learn how to heal it as well, so I could be more informative in my book. Okay, so it's very likely that I've actually had 3 different types of cancers, and all of them healed with without any traditional cancer treatment. And I would not recommend that for anyone who is in an advanced stage of cancer. For instance, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this stream as well, because the person that I've been coaching more recently came to me nearly dead of leukemia. It had moved into his lymphatic system. He had very large growths on the sides of his neck. He couldn't swallow food anymore. He was literally on the precipice of dying. And he'd had my book though but he hadn't been using any of the information. And this is really common too. Somebody else that I was coaching had my book for like a year and had cancer 2 years ago when they had traditional treatment, but for some reason did not incorporate any of my advice until she found a new lump in her breast. And I understand why too, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this too, is because we don't understand cancer, and we often have a lot of fear around mortality and disease. A lot of us only have coping mechanisms to ignore problems. We don't want to go through the inconvenience of being sick. We don't want to have to go to the doctor. We don't want to face what it means for the end of our life. And so as a coping mechanism, most of us only have tools of like willfully ignoring those things. So when people are sick, like this new friend of mine who I've been helping, has been very, very ill for like the last 3 years, and it was extremely obvious he was developing cancer, and he did not go get checked out by a doctor probably for an entire year when he should have been doing it, because he didn't want to face it. And I totally understand that. I mean, it's scary, and you know, especially when and this person's actually very young. I don't know how old he is actually, but I think he's in his late 20s. So it's really sad to get cancer when you're that young, right? And you grow up believing that that you can conquer the world and that your adult life is going to be fantastic. And then you get to adulthood and your health is starting to fail, and you don't even have energy to have sex or walk your dogs around the block. I mean, that's what was happening to me. When I was at my worst, I could not even walk my dogs around the block without being completely out of breath and feeling like I was drowning in the air. It was so awful. And and I was only 34 years old. And some people are even more unfortunate to have it happen much earlier. So we try to avoid that, because first of all, we don't know how to handle it, both logistically and emotionally, and we don't want to either. Excuse me, I've been coughing more today. So very often people are reluctant to actually face it. And I there was this other woman too, and I told this story in a previous stream. It was a cousin of somebody that I have had a relationship with through my work, who is a nutritionist, recommended me and my book to their cousin, who had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she hit me up. And I gave her my recommendation, and I gave her my book, and I gave her my book. She didn't buy it or anything, and I told her to read the first 8 chapters and the chapter on cancer to start incorporating all that advice, and then keep me updated on her progress. And And when and the reason I do this too is because like I can't keep tabs on everybody, like, and I say this with my coaching clients, like it's your job to keep me updated to what's going on, because I have a lot of people that I work with, so I can't remember what everyone's going through and to keep tabs on everybody. It's just impossible. You know, I went through 15 years of alcoholism and cancer and all these other diseases. My brain doesn't work that great. Like I have to take time for myself too. And so like, so I'm like, and then let me know, like, you know, keep me up, like, let me know your progress and keep me updated on what you're doing. And so then some time passed and I forgot about her. And then about, I think it was like, I don't remember the timeline exactly, but I think it was like 6 months later ish, something like that. She hits me up and she asks me if I will post her, her GoFundMe cancer treatment on my Facebook. And I was like, wait, what? Why? I was like, how's it going? Like, what have you been doing? Like, tell me, like, what you, how, like, what did you get out of my book? What have you been doing out of my book? And she said she hadn't even read it. And my heart just fell out of my chest because like I literally gave it to her. She had it in her hands. And how long does it take to read a chapter? Like 30 minutes at most, the chapter on cancer, just literally 30 minutes. And it's not even like, you know, she doesn't have to use the information, right? Like she could choose not to do it if she didn't want to, but she didn't even bother reading it. And then, I mean, then of course I was like, well, I wouldn't post your fundraiser anyway. I don't know you. And I don't even have that many followers anyway. It wouldn't be very useful for you. And I'm sorry, but I was like, read the stuff, start doing what it says and keep me updated. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to be sick. And anyway, and then the last time I heard about her was from my cousin, my friend, who said she had died, which was like 2 months after that interaction. And she never ever did anything in my book, and she didn't even read it. And it was in her hands, and she was only like in her 30s or 20s too. She was very young, so it was really, really tragic. And not a single person that I've worked with that has read my book and used this information is dead. In fact, all of them are doing really great. And this latest client, who was almost dead, he couldn't even swallow. His lymph nodes in his neck were swollen so badly he could not even swallow food. And so he finally broke open my book, started integrating this stuff, signed up for coaching with me a week later. And within 2 weeks, he was able to eat again and swallow food without any other treatment, just using using aspirin and using the nutritional guides in my book. Was starting to sleep better and eat well. Being able to eat. And was making pretty good progress. He did have an incident where his immune system collapsed and he had no white immune cells and had to go to the hospital. But that was only after 2 weeks of using my stuff. There could have been some factor of aspirin actually maybe further exacerbating immune cell deficiency in that case, because he was so fucking sick. I mean, like literally just was really, really close to dying. But generally that doesn't really happen usually. That's not a function of aspirin. It was a function of how severe his leukemia was. They didn't even know that it was a leukemia yet at that time. He was still waiting for the biopsy that had only been done like a week before. And but thankfully he went to the hospital. They put him on steroids for a few days and his immune function came back. And then he flew to the United States for cancer treatment. And then that was also really stressful for him too, though, because like, you know, you really shouldn't fly when you're that ill. Like flying can be very stressful on the body, and it set him back quite a bit. And he was really, really sick. And then they made him also go without food for 18 hours before doing tests, which is also extremely stressful on the body. And that's why you don't want to put off treatment. Like if you're doing bad, he never needed to get to this point. If he had read my book and started practicing this stuff in there, he would never, ever have developed the cancer as severely as he did. But part of the reason was because we don't want to face it. You know, we try to ignore it, and it gets worse when that happens because we are subjected to laws of reality, and your biology does not care what you want. If you cannot face those fears and take care of yourself, it will get worse. That's how life works. And you know, and I think karmically too that having cancer is meant for us to have a more deep appreciation of what it means to be alive. A lot of people can be very sad, and my friend too, he was very, very sad for having cancer, and I was like, look, you're going to be fine, because now you're doing the stuff I'm telling you and you're getting treatment, like you're going to do great. And especially in your treatment is going to be more successful too, because you're following my advice and eating the right nutrients and taking care of yourself. Like, yes, it's sad that this happens, but it's also an opportunity to understand how precious your life is and how, and what it really means to be alive. Life is forcing you to understand that because you were just ignoring it before. And so, while cancer can be scary, it also has more of a life lesson in there about how neat it is to be alive, and the depths of our experience of living really is. It's not this superficial, constantly happy thing. We all strived for permanent happiness, and that's ridiculous. Like that is not how life works. And if you can't understand, and if you can't accept the pain in life as well as the good, you'll never really understand what it means to be alive. But anyway, that was me poorly waxing poetic. I'm a better writer about those things. I think the way that I write about that in my book is much more effective than doing a podcast. But anyway, okay, so let's talk about respiration and nutrients. So there are several environmental nutrients and factors that are relevant to cancer treatment. First of all, because cancer is essentially a deficit of respiration, there is no way that you get better when you have cancer if you are dieting. It just doesn't happen. If you diet, you will die. You have to eat food, and constantly. You need to keep your blood sugar up, because when your blood sugar falls, your stress hormones rise, and stress hormones directly lower the metabolic rate, because during exposure to stress, your body activates all of these systems that are designed to preserve nutrients. In terms of our evolution, nutrient scarcity is more of a liability than cancer. And if you don't have enough to eat and you don't have the right nutrients in your environment, you're just going to die anyway. So when you diet and you starve yourself, your body purposefully lowers the metabolic rate so that you don't run out of spare nutrients. Of course, we don't have that problem anymore, usually in the societies that we live in. We usually have an excess of calories, but our biology still works on those same principles and same metabolic pathways. So dieting, and especially low carbohydrate diets, very strongly promote cancer development. And that's one of the reasons why I got cancer too, was because from the time that I was like 17 and 18 years old, I dieted all the time, and I worked out excessively, which consumes nutrients too, right? And raises stress hormones as well. So not only was I excessively physically stressing my body through excess exercise, but I was also not feeding it commensurate to that metabolic stress. And in fact, was not even eating sufficiently enough to support my normal metabolic activity, let alone the physical activity. So one of the reasons that I got the cancer in the first place was because I was constantly putting my body in a state of perpetual metabolic stress, which promotes a deficit of respiration through calorie and carbohydrate deficiency. And I found part of my recovery required that because I started also doing all these other strategies like taking aspirin that continually stimulated my metabolic respiration. And because I was doing that as well, my body just hurt so bad all the time if I did not eat enough food. Because I was supporting active raising of my metabolic rate, I had to have calories to fuel that. And I found especially, and I'm enormous too. I'm 6'7" and 200. At the time I was 301 pounds when I got diagnosed with the tumors on my thyroid. But then I lost 60 pounds over the several months after that through a lot of this work that I've done. And so then I was, what is that math? 240? Yeah, I got down to 240. And so I was still really huge, right? And especially because although I had lost weight, I was raising my metabolic rate. And so my massive, massive body size required huge amounts of calories just to keep me from dying. So I found it necessary to in order to treat my cancer and support the approach to cancer that I was using, I needed to, in addition to normal meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I had to bring snacks and smoothies with me everywhere I went, to work and other stuff that I was doing. I bought a blender and I bought a giant thermos. It was enormous. And I would make I would fill the blender to the top every morning. I would make like I would make fruit smoothies using frozen fruit and sugar and a protein powder, casein usually, plus juice. And sometimes I add in the supplements I was taking, and sometimes I would use milk though. Like I had like a frozen berry blend, and I would use that with orange juice and sugar and casein powder, or I would do like all frozen strawberries with milk and sugar and casein powder. And it was like having ice cream, strawberry ice cream every day. It was so great. And that was in addition to like a normal breakfast and lunch and snacks. And so I would take that with me to work. And because the oh, and by the way, sorry, Phallus, I'll answer that question when I get done talking about this stuff. And because the thermos was really good, like it would stay cold for a long period of time. And so that was really good. And I would sip off that all day long and keep my blood sugar up. And that really helped to promote my cellular respiration, in addition to the other things I was using. So a lot of the elements that directly support respiration are, first of all, the most important one is vitamin C. Our bodies, cellular respiration and metabolic pathways create energy. And when that happens, your body produces reactive oxygen species as a side effect. It's not possible to make energy without risking reactive oxygen species synthesis production. And so one of the protective factors against that are antioxidants. And vitamin C is a rate limiting antioxidant in our body for respiration, because respiration results in the production of reactive oxygen species. If you do not have enough vitamin C in your body, that produces reactive oxygen species, and then your body downregulates the metabolic rate in order to protect your body from producing damaging reactive oxygen species. So vitamin C regulates that, actually. And maybe you might have also heard of Linus Pauling. He was a giant of science. He got a Nobel Prize. He was a big proponent. He discovered a lot about vitamin C and was a big proponent for it throughout his life. And like vitamin C is just a fundamental nutrient for human metabolic respiration. Most animals produce their own vitamin C, but primates, along with some other creatures like guinea pigs, do not produce our own vitamin C. And I have come to hypothesize that the reason for that is that it is an adaptive survival mechanism. Because vitamin C regulates the metabolic rate, if you are an animal that does not make vitamin C, when it is not available in your environment, meaning there's not a lot of food available in your environment, your metabolic rate automatically downregulates. So then you're actually able to survive through famine for much longer than other animals that produce their own vitamin C, because their metabolisms stay up all the time and they need a constant supply of food and are not able to survive through times of nutrient deficiency very well. So that's why we don't produce our own vitamin C. But a consequence of that is that our metabolic rate can become chronically suppressed if you are not getting that in your diet. And if you have cancer, that usually indicates an extreme vitamin C deficiency, mostly through diet. And then and also too, the dietary recommendations for vitamin C are usually really insufficient. It's like 100 milligrams a day, right? And there's evidence that like all of our primate relatives get closer to a full gram of vitamin C every day through their diets. You need to increase your vitamin C intake daily. minimum like 400 to 500 through diet, and that's not even enough, right? But that's good for diet. And then on top of that, use a supplement to supplement that. You should not only rely on a supplement. Your diet needs to contain natural vitamin C, and then you can use a supplement on top of that to exaggerate and accentuate the antioxidant capacity through a supplement. A lot of people also don't know, well, most people don't know any of this, but one of the other things that people don't know about vitamin C is that we actually lose vitamin C every night. That's part of how we get a vitamin C deficiency and why our metabolic rate downregulates, because you have to have some every single day in order to prevent the deficiency that would occur and then result in metabolic downregulation. The reason for this is that the body dumps vitamin C whenever stress hormones are released. Is specifically one of the initiating hormones called adrenocorticotropin hormone, which catalyzes the release of like cortisol. That happens every night, and the sicker you are, the more that is activated as well. And because our body, in response to stress, wants to downregulate the metabolic rate in order to promote your own survival in evolutionary terms. And so we lose vitamin C every night, and the sicker you are, the more vitamin C you lose at night and every time that you go without food and every time you're stressed. So that's why you have to get more vitamin C in your diet in order to sustain metabolic respiration, in order to counteract the hypoxia and lowered metabolic respiration of cancer cells and cancerous tissues. And the more cancer you have in the body, the more you need to support the respiration as well. So vitamin C is important for that. And whenever I'm working with people and I talk about metabolic rate, like, turning on your metabolic rate as early as you can in the day, having something as soon as you wake up, sugar and vitamin C are the best ways to turn on the metabolic rate. Fructose and vitamin C turn on the metabolic rate every day. There are other things too, if you're even more severe, that you have to use, but those are basically for everybody. When you wake up in the morning, it is the time of day that your stress hormones are highest because you've been sleeping and not eating, and your body's running out of glucose stores and running out of other nutrients. And and your stress hormones are highest then because adrenaline liberates glucose from glycogen storage. And then when you run out of glycogen storage, cortisol catabolizes your lean muscle into usable sugars and amino acids. And unless you don't eat breakfast, then they keep rising. And so, a lot of people actually won't feel hungry in the morning because of the suppressive effects of stress hormones on our hunger impulses, will not have breakfast on purpose because they want to be skinny and avoid calories, right? So since they're not hungry, they'll be like, oh, I can just skip breakfast. And they might even have a coffee too without calories, which is really awful to do for your body. And they won't eat lunch. They won't eat until like lunch or even later. That is exactly how cancer develops, because your cells need to respirate, and they cannot respirate if you don't intake carbohydrate and vitamin C and sugar and sunlight and all those things that support all these things, and vitamin K and all these things that support respiration. So when you have cancer, you eat immediately when you wake up. You have juice, even if it's just like an apple, and some people don't feel hungry either. But if you have fructose and vitamin C, it'll actually start your metabolic rate, which will stimulate hunger later. So just having like a glass of orange juice or an apple, apples are really good because they're very high in fructose and have some vitamin C. And also have indigestible carbohydrate pectin, which can be metabolized by our gut microbiome into short-chain fatty acids that also participate in really important metabolic cycles that are related to cancer too. So eating as soon as you wake up turns on your metabolic rate. That starts metabolic respiration. And the earlier you eat in the day and then sustain your metabolic rate throughout the day, the longer your body has to actually be on respiration, not on the backup fermentation and aerobic, because respiration is aerobic, and the other backup ways and problems are anaerobic. And so if you don't eat, you stay in anaerobic state, and that is what perpetuates cancer. And specifically too, like the pathway for this is that like cancer cells, even if they have oxygen, don't respirate and don't engage aerobic respiration. They produce high amounts of lactic acid and other compounds that that suppress metabolic respiration themselves. So, and it's not that like cancer, cancer, the tumors in cancer they don't kill you. It's the tumors aren't the thing that kill you in cancer. It's the hormones and metabolites that those tumors output that kills you. So the bigger a tumor gets, the more lactic acid it expresses. And that lactic acid leaks out of those tumors and circulates in your body, and that further depresses respiration in your other surrounding tissues. So then cancer spreads. And then you eventually die because you have so many tumors in your body producing so much lactic acid and ammonia and other toxic metabolites that your other tissues just can't live any longer, and then they all fail. So supporting respiration does the opposite. The tissues that are still healthy respirate and consume the lactic acid and produce CO2, which is kind of the opposite of lactic acid, has the opposite effect of lactic acid, which can only happen if you eat food and support respiration. So vitamin C and sugar are some of the fundamental support factors for that. The next one is vitamin K. Vitamin K directly participates in the respiration pathway. And in my book, I recommend also that people with cancer also use a supplement of vitamin K, also to support aspirin, because aspirin promotes respiration, it causes our body to tear through vitamin K more quickly. So you have to also take vitamin K as a supplement to support the use of aspirin. But you need to also get vitamin K from foods. It will not work if you're only using supplements. And I sometimes get people too that approach me that want coaching or are reading my book, and they'll be like, I'm using all the right supplements and I'm not getting better. And that's because you're only using supplements. The supplements will not make you better. The supplements only support a healthy lifestyle and diet. That has to happen first. You have to eat constantly. You have to have carbohydrate. You have to have vitamin C. You have to have foods like leafy greens that are high in vitamin K. If you don't, you will not get better. It doesn't matter what supplements you're taking. The supplements are only adjuncts to the diet and behavior. So you have to consume lots of vitamin K. It doesn't have to be every day, but as much as you can, and then using a supplement on top of that just makes it easier and accentuates the vitamin K that you're getting through your diet anyway. And so vitamin K directly participates in the respiration pathway. Also, our body also makes a compound that is basically also a vitamin K. It's called ubiquinone. And basically our body makes a form of vitamin K. It's related to vitamin K, but you have to also have dietary vitamin K also as well. So your body can't make that vitamin K if you're dieting. And that's one of the reasons why like dieting causes so much disease, is because your body cannot make these things if you're not eating plenty of food. So, but we do need dietary vitamin K as well. There's a lot of people in these circles who think that they have to avoid vegetables. Completely wrong. Complete misunderstanding of the science that we're talking about. Don't understand the context of the reasons for those kinds of ideas. Just total bullshit. Like that's not what you do. You have to eat your vegetables. It's required. Anyway, did I say 400 to 500 milligrams of vitamin C through food? Yes. If you have cancer, and then you can add on top of that a supplement. So you could take like a gram of vitamin C a day too. If you don't have cancer, if you are healthy, like 100, about, a normal, even small amounts of vitamin C can be effective because our body is really good at recycling a lot of nutrients. When you're sick, very often, our bodies are not good at, recycling nutrients because of deficiencies that interrupt those recycling pathways. For instance, vitamin C is regenerated through an enzyme called thioredoxin, which is zinc dependent. This person that I've been coaching recently too with really advanced leukemia said that when he started taking zinc, it started making him feel so much better. And that's one of the reasons why, is because zinc participates in the recycling of vitamin C. And so if you are, for some reason, zinc deficient, and in my book, I do emphasize, getting enough zinc in your diet, or even using it as a supplement, will support your vitamin C pathways. Because it supports recycling. A lot of people, this is also a really interesting point of ignorance that a lot of people have, is that no one really understands that no nutrients in our environment come in sufficient quantities to support our health. If we were not able to recycle vitamin C, vitamin K, vitamin E, zinc, iron, copper, we would just die, because there is not enough in our diets. And that's why disease becomes so difficult to treat, is because there is not enough of those nutrients in our environment to de facto support our health. You have to turn on, you have to like support your recycling pathways. So if you're dieting all the time, that's directly interfering with your recycling pathways, and then you're not able to recycle the small amount of nutrients you are actually consuming, and that's why you get sick and die when you diet excessively, or don't support your physical activity with sufficient intake of calories. So if you are healthy, like, you can just have, like, you don't have to even measure, just as long as you're getting vitamin C foods, like orange juice and strawberries and leafy greens and other stuff like that, berries, like plenty. You don't have to measure it. But if you do have cancer, you do need to make sure that you're getting plenty of it every single day. And in that case, if you are any kind of metabolic illness, I would say that you should be aiming for at least around like 400 milligrams of vitamin C through your diet a day. And the more sick you are, the more you need, because you're not recycling it and you're losing a lot of it because of the stress hormones. So you have to compensate for that. And that becomes imperative in cancer treatment. So vitamin K we can also recycle, but not always so easily. From some of my more recent research, this is not in my book, when we are deficient in the endogenous antioxidant glutathione, vitamin K actually steps in and acts in place of it. And then this means, though, that vitamin K becomes oxidized. And in order for vitamin K to participate in a lot of pathways, it has to be carboxylated, which means having CO2 added to it. Sorry, I misspoke. That's also within like the function of calcium. Vitamin K has a very intimate relationship with calcium metabolism in our body, and that has to be carboxylated in order to fulfill its functional roles, basically. So when we become deficient in glutathione, which comes from stress and dietary deprivation. Hey, Sogo. Oh, thanks. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Yeah, that book, my second book isn't, quite as, widespread as my other one. So that's nice to hear. Thanks. Sorry, I have such a one-track mind. Vitamin K. So when you have a deficiency also of glutathione, vitamin K gets consumed more quickly because it's stepping in as a backup for glutathione. And that also means that the vitamin K gets oxidized and you lose more of it more rapidly, which is why it's also so important to have a lot of vitamin K when you have cancer, because vitamin K is indispensable for the respiration pathways. And so if you're not getting vitamin K, you cannot respirate. And that's one of the reasons why vitamin K supported the healing of the lesion that I had on my back, on my skin, the skin cancer. Specifically also too, because one strategy that I used was to take some vitamin B12 with vitamin K foods. And I mentioned this in my book in the chapter on gut health, that B12 is required by our gut microbiome to adhere to substrate, because usually both these food substrates and the bacteria are negatively charged, so they repel each other. So bacteria aren't actually able to adhere to the substrate. And B12 is highly positively charged, and it's used by our microbiome to neutralize their charge so that they can actually adhere to substrate that they consume. And our gut microbiome produce vitamin K2 from vitamin K. And vitamin K2 is just as important for our body as vitamin K is. And a lot of people think that they can just take vitamin K2 as a supplement and be fine. And no, that is not how the body works. You can take a vitamin K2 supplement to supplement vitamin K2, but it is not the same thing as getting it naturally from your gut microbiome. And you can't get it from your gut microbiome if you aren't eating food sources of it. And the supplements don't work because they are directly absorbed into the body. Also, supplements usually only contain like 1 or 2 kinds of vitamin K2. There are, at least that we know of, 13 different types of K2. And we don't even know what they all do. We don't even know what the most abundant ones really do, actually. Vitamin K2 is very poorly understood in human metabolic function. So like we don't even know what it does, but we do know it's important. So you cannot support that. You cannot replicate that through a supplement. You have to be eating it. So specifically the lesion on my back was healed when I took in a lot of vitamin K2 and had a little bit of B12 with it. And that really supported. And I think that my gut microbiome made an abundance of K2 that was then distributed throughout my body and helped rescue a lot of deficient pathways that were contributing to skin cancer. Okay, and as a tangent, let's talk about skin cancer real quick. People talk about UV radiation damage causing skin cancer, so they avoid the sun. And yes, actually, well, I mean, that's not really, that is a wrong application of what is true there. So the appropriate conclusion for the fact that sun damage can cause skin cancer is not to avoid the sun. It's to support our antioxidant defense mechanisms that prevent radiation damage from the sun. We as a species evolved under the sun for millions of years. Like, our body is designed to get sunshine. In fact, you need to get sunshine, especially in treating cancer, ironically, even in cases of skin cancer, because sunlight stimulates mitochondrial respiration, the very thing that we need to occur in order to fight cancer. When you don't get sun exposure, nitric oxide moves into mitochondria and inhibits the respiratory enzyme cytochrome oxidase that participates in respiration. So and that's one of the other major etiological causes of cancer, are these lifestyles where we're indoors all the time, all day long. And I suspect that that's one of the reasons one of my friend got such severe leukemia was because he is a young man who spent all of his time indoors on the computer, even though he also lives in a warm, sunny, tropical climate. So if you combine perpetuity indoors with a poor diet that also impairs respiration, it's then really easy to get cancer because your cells just can't fucking respirate. Sunlight exposure directly knocks nitric oxide off of mitochondria and helps to stimulate respiration. And so sunlight is actually imperative for that. So if you're trying to avoid skin cancer by avoiding the sun, you actually might ironically get skin cancer because your skin becomes hypoxic. So I think specifically one of the reasons that I got the skin cancer in the first place was because when I was I think I was 16 years old, I worked, my dad was an architect and contractor, a general contractor. So I worked with him doing construction all my life growing up. But one particular time when I was 16, he made my brother and I go out and lay sod on a new property in the middle of summer, in the middle of the day. And even though I had sunblock, I got like the worst sunburn that I've ever gotten in my life. And even though I was blistering, he made me go back out and lay sod again the next day. And I got sunburned again on top of like a complete 3rd-degree sunburn. It was so bad. Like, it started peeling and bleeding, and it was the most pain ever. And it was so horrible. And the worst part was right around the area that I did end up getting the skin cancer there. Because yes, UV radiation can catalyze skin cancer, but But that is not what causes the cancer. The thing that causes the cancer is a lack of our defense mechanisms that are designed to inhibit UV radiation damage. Because we are an animal that has evolved under the influence of the sun for many millions of years, we possess defensive mechanisms for UV radiation damage. Vitamin C participating in that. I mean, not vitamin C, vitamin K, sorry, is what I meant to say. And glutathione and zinc and other nutrients like that. And my diet growing up was very deficient in vitamin K. I only ever really had vitamin K if it was like a piece of lettuce on a hamburger or a salad. Like on Sundays, we'd have salad with our Sunday dinner. But generally, literally, like my diet just literally had almost no vitamin K in it generally. Or broccoli, we did have broccoli a bit, like so. Probably occasionally once a week or something like that, we'd have like broccoli with cheese sauce or something like that. But vegetables, especially green vegetables, did not make up a cornerstone of our diet. So, and then I was a competitive swimmer as well in high school. And my coach was insane too. We started doing 3 training sessions a day in fucking high school. I had to wake up at 4:30 in the morning to get to 5 a.m. swim practice, like 5:15 a.m. I think, and swim before school. And then we would lift weights like 3 days a week. Our swim class period, we would actually lift weights, and then we would go train and swim again after school for another few hours. It was absolutely nuts. Children should not be trained like that for athletics, especially without nutritional coaching. And there was never any emphasis by my coach or my parents about nutritionally supporting such insane amounts of physical activity. And a lot of the reasons why I got so sick and had so many illnesses was because of these really harmful dietary behaviors and overexercising and stuff like that. So anyway, then I got this really bad sunburn on my skin when I was like 16. And then my diet was a lot like that still, though, continuing to grow up. So where my body would have normally healed that UV damage, I had eating disorders and excessive exercise until all up until I was like 30, nearing my 30s. And so I could just perpetually was insufficient in the nutrients that my body needed to heal that problem. And so then I developed this skin cancerous lesion on my skin that was there for about 10 years. And when it finally went away, it was with a sedentary lifestyle, with these specific nutritional strategies that I've been promoting. And it's been gone now for like 2.5 years or something like that. So completely, because it started going away like 3.5, 4 years ago, but it would come back periodically. And that was because I really didn't know how to utilize vitamin K. So getting more vitamin K and also using B12. And also too, like, there's also some evidence that like boron can be helpful for these pathways. And I talk about boron a little bit in my book, but like you just get it through like eating plenty of fruits anyway. So I wasn't doing that, but I think that boron might have helped just like incidentally through like a diet high in fruits and vegetables as well. But the vitamin K, and especially using a little bit of B12, what that was the thing. Like I had recovered a lot of my symptoms of leukemia and thyroid cancer many years ago, back when I was 35, 36, 34 to 36, I mean. But then the skin cancer one didn't heal until a few years later using vitamin K and B12. So anyway, so vitamin K is also indispensable in cancer treatment, first through diet and then using a supplement to support your diet that way. And then I have mentioned aspirin a lot. And I'm not going to tell you doses and stuff here. That's in my book. But like aspirin, also daily aspirin regimen is really, really excellent for treating cancer. Aspirin should always be used like in the lowest effective dose, meaning if you don't need to use it, don't use it. But if you have diseases that would benefit from it, then use it. And only use the dose though that is effective in the lowest as possible, just to avoid side effects, because there's no reason to use a huge amount. But when I was at my sickest, I was using like 8 aspirin a day. I don't think you really need quite that high, but like, there's more information on that in my book, especially the precautions and other things you need to know of. And then also in my book, there's also, I touch on other ideas. So like I mentioned earlier, when you have cancer, the tumor isn't really the thing that kills you. It is the hormones and toxic metabolites that those tumors are outputting that does kill you. A lot of people don't understand or know that by the time you're like 30, you're growing tumors all over your body, actually. And by the time you're like 50 or 60, a person will have hundreds of tumors all over their body of varying sizes sometimes. Tumors are a natural byproduct of growing and healing tissue. And there's a lot of pathogenic angles to those where you contract viruses or different bacteria or parasites, and tumors and cysts grow around those things and stuff like that. And they don't kill you. The cancer kills you because of the metabolites that it outputs. So supporting respiration through these strategies is one of the primary ways to attack cancer and prevent it from progressing, because that stops those tumors from producing these toxic metabolites. There are also some more specific strategies, which I won't get into here because I've been talking for so long already, but I mentioned in my book, like certain amino acids that can block certain pathways of the production of certain torporific hormones in your body, and little strategies like that. And then those are incidental to the, or tangential to the primary supportive respiration, wherein those more specific strategies can inhibit things like torporific hormones and other stress hormones to further accentuate reducing the deteriorative effects of having those tumors. So yeah. Anyway, so like if you're dealing with cancer, or people that are, it doesn't need to be scary. The only reason it is scary is because we don't understand it. And this is how cancer works. Like Otto Warburg knew how cancer worked like 100 years ago, or maybe not 100. I don't remember when he worked, like 60, 70 years ago. Like scientists have known for a long time how cancer works. It's the medical profession and the distribution of that knowledge that is the reason for most people's fear of cancer. Cancer, in my experience, is actually fairly easy to treat. It's a lot easier to treat than like infectious illnesses, because it is actually the body's own tissues. It's not an invasive pathogen itself. And the body and our tissues are trying to heal, and all you need to do is support their healing. And even if you do choose to use traditional cancer treatment, these approaches can support that and complement that, and you'll heal faster and you'll have less chance of relapse. One woman that I helped with cancer had stage 4 breast cancer, and it had moved into her bones, and her family was preparing for her to die. And she got my book, and I didn't even coach her. She just used the information in my book. And she got and because chemo had failed, and that's what I mean. Like, it had moved into her bones after chemo. But then after using my work, she got a diagnosis of no evidence of disease, which is that's how they say you're cured, because they can't say the word cure because so many people end up getting it again, that if you say you're cured and you get it again, that's like a liability. So they give you a no evidence of disease diagnosis. And she got that after using my work with stage 4 breast cancer that had moved into her bones. But then one of the problems though with this too is that once we start feeling better, we make progress, people give up what they're doing. And you cannot do that with cancer. If you've had cancer or you have cancer, you cannot stop doing these things at all in the future. Like you can never stop it. You can't take your vitamin C for granted. You can't take your vitamin K for granted. You can't take sunlight for granted. You need to support respiration more than other people. And you need to especially focus on it for about a year or two afterward to prevent relapse. And this woman, she didn't relapse with cancer, but she started feeling bad again. And I was like, what are you doing to support your health? And the only thing she was doing was taking vitamin C. Because she felt so much better. And she was like, like the rest of us do, taking our health for granted when it's good, because we don't have motivation to do anything about it because we just feel fine. But you can't do that when you have cancer. When you have cancer, you have to support recovery continuously. at least for a year and a half, 2 years after you get better. But you still can never take those specific nutrients for granted because your metabolic health is compromised. And like I mentioned too, most people present with like pathogenic infection, especially of the gums. And there's I forget what the antibiotic is. Let me look that up real quick. There's an antibiotic you can use that wipes that out real quick. Ceftriaxone, Ceftriaxone. Ceftriaxone. It is an injection antibiotic. Oral antibiotics do not wipe out oral pathogens. Oral pathogens live inside of our tissues, and oral administration of antibiotics do not get into our tissues. So you have to have like those better antibiotics. It's also used to eradicate STDs, and it's an injection, and you have to have medical professional administer that. Do not try to do that on your own. But that can help accelerate recovery from cancer. But the thing is too, you can easily catch that. And in my book, I talked about how to cure oral disease anyway on the long term, and you need to do that long term to prevent yourself from catching those. And so if you have cancer and you have bleeding gums, you get a shot of that. It'll wipe out your gum bleeding, and that will help you recover faster. But you have to avoid any sexual activity and risk of contamination through salivary exchange with other people. If you have a romantic partner, they should get treated as well, so that you're not continually passing those back and forth between you. And that also probably could have been the thing that crashed my client's immune system after that, because I don't know the details of how that works. So that's why you need to have a doctor's supervision for that anyway. But and a lot of doctors don't know about that. So you'll have to be persistent. You have to take charge of your health. I was coaching somebody one time that they didn't have cancer, but they had a lot of weight gain and real trouble getting better. And I was like, I can't heal this on you. You're gonna have to go get it. And I suspect that her husband had it as well, which is why she wasn't able to get better, because they just kept reinfecting each other. And I was like, you both have to go get treated with this antibiotic for this to stop, especially because her husband wasn't doing anything to take care of his health. And she just wouldn't do it. She just refused. She was scared of getting an antibiotic. And she, she never lost weight, and she never got better because she refused to get that treated. Like your body, your nature does not care what you want or believe or think. Like that's not how it works. Pathogens are often very virulent, and they can cause a lot of health problems. And so you have to take care of them. And since they can underlie cancer, it can be very, very helpful for you to get a shot of that ceftriaxone, because it can get rid of those pathogens that catalyze a lot of cancers. Also, like iodine, also, and this podcast is not a substitute for my book. My book is much more detailed. Also, I forgot, like iodine deficiency, again, another nutrient deficiency caused by dieting. Iodine deficiency is specifically shown to promote an increased risk in glandular cancers. So breast cancer and prostate cancer, those all benefit from getting plenty of dietary iodine. So you can get a little iodine supplement to support that, to help you with that. So yeah. So I mean, dieting is ultimately one of the biggest causes of cancer for all of those reasons. So anyway, so that's cancer. So if you have cancer, keep your chin up. You don't need to be scared of it. And if you don't have cancer, you don't need to be scared of it in the future. Like, these tools do work. Like, they cured me of 3 different types of cancer. and they've helped everybody. And I haven't lost a single person that with cancer that has used my work. So, you don't need to be scared of it. It's just a disease. It's not a big deal. And you can treat it effectively with these nutritional strategies, and they can also complement traditional cancer therapy if you need that as well. So anyway, so I'll answer your question. So if you don't know, I answer health questions. So and when the questions stop, we end the stream. So I hope you're all having a good holiday, by the way. It's a nice season for that. Lots of snow if you're in the northern hemisphere. Let's see. Okay, so Phallus, you asked earlier, if you're still here, Potatoes kill your sleep. Yeah. Oh, I don't think you were asking a question. I think you were like just commenting because of my work. Oh, because I did mention potatoes. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, they kill your sleep, make you blush, increase serotonin, and kill your eye contact ability. Yeah. So if you don't know, potatoes have a glycoalkaloid toxin in them called solanine, which inhibits an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase, which is in turn responsible for regulating acetylcholine, which is a neurostimulant in our body. And so that means you get excessive acetylcholine expression, which overstimulates your nervous system. So yes, so potatoes, they can contribute to sleep, insomnia. Blushing is interesting. I've never heard that, but that makes sense. Like our cardiovascular system is highly regulated by acetylcholine function. So and dilation is actually triggered by acetylcholine. Actually, so that's not actually surprising. But yes, and because it's a stress pathway, it ends up increasing also your stress hormones and torporific hormones. And then torporific hormones diminish our emotional functions, like things like eye contact with people. Yeah. So that all checks out. Unfortunately, yeah. So potatoes, I like when I was, and I talk about, there's a stream in here for alcoholism and addiction. And I talk about in my book that, nightshade family of vegetables actually contribute to alcoholism and addiction. And I had to abstain from any potato consumption for quite a few months while I was recovering from alcoholism. And even now, like if I like eat a lot of potatoes, let's say like I eat potatoes like 4 or 5 times a week, in about a month or 2 of doing that, I'll start to develop cravings for alcohol. Like little tiny, like I can feel it just starting to creep up. So I only eat potatoes probably like, I'll have like a week where I'll have like 3 dishes of potatoes and then go like a week without them. And so I actually keep it lower than what other people might consume for that reason. This was a whole other, okay. So the nervous system also is actually involved in cancer etiology as well, actually, because, and I mentioned this in the book too, like the nervous system steps in when the metabolic rate falls. It's like your nerves try to shock and stimulate your cells to increased metabolic activity. It's akin to like using a defibrillator on someone having a heart attack. Your immune system increases its stimulation of cells that are metabolically distressed. And in cancer, that's actually one of the major mechanistic drivers behind cancer, is that these cells that are failing get stimulated by excess acetylcholine stimulation through the nervous system. And that's part of what causes their uncontrolled growth. And so also in my book, I talk about using like low-dose antihistamine to treat things like cancer. And so actually avoiding potatoes can be useful, as well as cutting down on your chloride intake a little bit. There's like, you know, and also I mentioned this too, like even though there is a chapter on cancer on my book, the whole book is the cure for cancer, not just the chapter on it. So some people will get in and only read the chapters that they think are relevant to their issue, but that's not how my book works. The entire book is relevant to everything that is going on with you. The chapters that are specific are only focused on the major aspects of those things. And you have to read the whole thing in order to really understand and take control of your health, not just being lazy and reading only the few that you think are relevant, because they're not. That won't be sufficient, because biology is really complex and there's a lot of angles to it. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, thanks again, Sogo, for talking about my other book. I'm glad you read it. Yeah, psychological stress is such a huge influence on our lives. I have the most fun coaching people through inventory therapy, because a lot of people come to me for help with their physical health because we're vain and we want and superficial. We want people to be attracted to us. But there are limitations on mortality. Like you can't be sexy and young forever. And a lot of people don't understand this too. You will spend more years of your life old than you will young if you're lucky to live to an old age. You know, you're only young until like what, maybe 35 at the most. And if you live to 80, 90 years old, you spend like, you know, 1 or 2 more decades longer as an old person than you do as a young person. And there's so much more value to us as individuals than just our physical appearance and our physical health. And when I coach people with their psychological health and using like the therapies that are in The Perfect Child, that really revolutionizes their lives. And it's really fun to see the change that happens in their psyche. I get people who are emotionally drained and stressed out by everything, and they turn around. And of course, nutritional work supports this as well, for sure. For instance, I was talking to a coachee the other day who was feeling really irritated, and we went through some issues that were bothering them through their inventory therapy. But they also hadn't used vitamin C, had eaten any vitamin C or taken a supplement for almost a week, and irritation is specifically caused by excess reactive oxygen species production. It literally is what makes you feel irritated. So using vitamin C helps to quench all those reactive oxygen species, and it can make you feel a lot better, you know, very shortly. But when people do the inventory therapy and it literally resolves their trauma, it's really special. Like people end up having a lot more fun in life and fearing less and hating themselves less. And none of us should hate ourselves, you know. Like it's so sad that we get trauma in the first place. And like, you know, having compassion for yourself and learning that it's okay to have bad things happen to you, and it's okay that you make mistakes or are not, you know, perfect the way that you think. It's really wonderful to help people understand that, and really rewarding. First time you heard my voice. Yeah. Yeah, I've got a few episodes on here. This is the 12th podcast that I've done on here. I did a lot. I used to do a lot more with I would play Minecraft and let people come and chat, but I took all those down because they got taken down for music that I was using during them. And they were also really long and kind of meandering, so I just took those down. But I like doing the podcasts and chatting. My voice is getting a little bit strained now from having talked for a few hours, but yeah. You experimented a lot. 120 milligrams progesterone makes you fat. Oxandrolone and I think drostanolone. I don't know what that is. Do you mean androsterone? I don't. Are those products? Because I don't think I've ever heard of those. Oh, it's an anabolic steroid. I don't know all the steroids. I don't know what that is. Is that a synthetic one? Yeah. It sounds like, are you male? Is that why? Yeah. Wait. All weight gain usually is related. Weight gain can be caused by a lot of problems, but it is very often pathogenic, actually. And then those infections can disrupt your steroid production. So very often supplementing them can. And but I haven't looked into those steroids specifically, so I don't know how they would benefit you. Sometimes, you know, sometimes we can be so desperate to be sexy and attractive that we take things that hurt our health in the long run. So I don't know what they do. I just want to caution you from, you know, excessively doing things that are harmful. You know, for instance, like famously recently, it was the Liver King. You know, he'd been for years lying, saying that his dietary approaches and products were the reason that he was so ripped. But in fact, he was using steroids, and those can have really serious side effects. So like, even though they might make you more muscular and lean, steroids can often have really debilitating side effects. He's gone almost completely bald on the top of his head, and then would wear a hat around all the time because he was really insecure about his appearance. Because like, if you base your self-worth on how you look, it is inevitable that you will face aging. And if you don't understand how to accept that fact, aging will cause you a lot of stress, and then you'll resort to doing things that harm your body, and get implants. And one time I hooked up with this dude once who had butt implants, and it was so fucking weird because he was really good looking. He definitely didn't need butt implants, and like, when I touched his butt, you could feel it. Like, you could literally feel the implants, and it creeped me out so much that I just instinctually like jerked my hand away because I didn't know what I was touching. It was definitely not a human butt. And I think he noticed that I did that too, and then it was just really awkward between us, and it wasn't fun at all. And I there's no need to do this kind of stuff. Like, a lot of us have body dysmorphia and trauma that makes us think that we're not attractive or valuable, even when we are attractive. And every person has value just from your innate existence, and you don't need to justify that, and you don't need to get people to like you, and you don't need to be attractive. And very often when we have trauma that causes that, we do things like take harmful supplements and steroids, and steroids can like shrink your balls, because if you're not I'm not saying these ones specifically, Sogo, because I don't know a lot about them, but like supplementing testosterone, for instance. If you take testosterone as a cisgender male, meaning you have testicles, it will actually shrink your testicle size, because your testicles, your body does not want to produce excess testosterone. So your body downregulates the synthesis of testosterone when you're supplementing it, because you're supplementing it. And then on top of that, so one of the problems behind metabolic disease, especially in cisgender men, is that the testosterone that our bodies are making ends up aromatizing excessively into estrogen, and the site of that aromatization is actually the testicles, ironically. And so a lot of people who have metabolic disease and try to address them through steroid use actually end up perpetuating this metabolic deficit, because you're taking testosterone that aromatizes into estrogen in your testicles, and your testicles are also downregulating their own testosterone production. So you have even more aromatization of the estrogen that you're taking. And I won't name names, but there's a lot of prominent public figures where this is happening, and they have weird body shapes. They're older, they look horrible, they look kind of really gross. And it's literally because they are supplementing testosterone, but not addressing their metabolic health. They're just trying to solve health problems through medicine because they're rich and they can afford it, and don't know how to actually solve these problems through the way the body actually works. So so while you can sometimes get side effects, positive side effects from doing that. Sorry, so you kept talking. You've lost most of your hair. Yeah, that's so because you've had metabolic stress, like, it causes things like weight gain and hair loss. But then if you take steroids on top of that, it can usually make some problems worse. Even if it does make you shredded, it can compromise your long-term health and prevent you from things like regrowing your hair. Okay, so they're both DHT derivatives. So, and also, I don't know if this is true with testosterone, but for instance, like, there are some studies that show negative side effects of progesterone, but those usually come from studies on synthetic progesterone, whereas natural forms of progesterone don't have those problems. And pharmaceutical products and industry usually say that synthetics are the same as the natural ones, and they're absolutely fucking not. For instance, some of my latest research on tannin, which is not in my, actually, well, so for all of you that are listening, if you have my book, there is an updated version of it on my website right now. And if you still have the code for getting your free update, you can go download that update right now if you want. It's not finished. I'm still doing a lot of work on the stuff that's in there, but it does have a lot of new information on stuff like tannin, which is going to be a huge part of my next update, and the nutritional benefits that it has for our body. You can go get that right now. If you're listening, and tell people that have it if they want to. So for instance, there are thousands of different tannins in nature, but science will often do experiments with a synthetic form, and they call it tannic acid. And there's no such thing as tannic acid. There's so many tannins. There is not one tannic acid, but the studies will say tannic acid as if it is representative of all tannins, and it will have very specific side effects that other tannins do not have because they have different chemical constituents. So I always am suspicious of pharmacological hormones, especially if they're synthesized, because they can have unintended metabolic consequences that are not necessarily desirable, which is why it's always paramount to try to accomplish these things just through diet, because there can be useful pharmacological interventions, right? But very often they cause side effects and can be problematic. And our bodies let's take some really hot 18-year-old young man, lots of muscles, really attractive, all of his hair. He doesn't look like that because he's shooting up DHT, right? Young people aren't running around taking medicine and hormones and supplements. They're just they're just very often just naturally healthy, because that is how our body is healthy. It doesn't get healthy through products and supplements and hormones but because so much of our industry is geared towards selling you products, they tell you that, and that's the only information we often have access to. Famously, I've been trying to get Hassan Piker's attention for, months about hair loss, because he's so fixated on his own hair loss. And he talks about taking finasteride, and finasteride downregulates your own DHT, and DHT, natural DHT, is the factor that promotes leanness in males. And he also then talks about his problems gaining with weight loss, which, he's a sex god. He's gorgeous. He's amazing. It doesn't need to be concerned about any of these things. This is classic young people behavior when you're when you approach 30, you think you're getting old, but trust me, when you get to be 40, you'll be like, fuck, I wish I had known that I was as good looking. And then when I get to be 50, I'm going to be like, fuck, I wish I had known how good looking I was at 40. It's fine. you don't need to be skinny. You don't need to regrow your hair, but perpetuating the products and pharmacological things like Hassan Piker, if you know him, he is a leftist socialist, and I love his viewpoints on universal healthcare and taking care of people, and inequality, and he's a real advocate to the LGBTQ community too, which is really great. But people like him are supposed to be self-aware and activists, but then when it comes to he's an anti-capitalist basically, but fully supports the pharmaceutical industry in perpetuating these myths behind hair loss and the use of these medications, which are not justified by actual science and are only being perpetuated to turn a profit for these capitalist systems that exploit our illnesses for their own profit. And do so through the dissemination of misinformation that other people just parrot without even a second thought. And it's even people who are supposed to be aware of these things. So like, yeah, anyway, so like yes, while you still can often use pharmacological agents, and the medical industry can be helpful sometimes, the ultimate end goal of being healthy has to be achieved through food and nutrition in your environment. There is no other way at all. Everything else is designed to just sell you products consistently and perpetually. And that's why there's no cure for diabetes yet, because the medical industry makes so much money off of just selling you diabetes medication, right? Like they're not going to make that money when there's a cure for diabetes, which I talk about in my book, The Cure for It, because diabetes is just caused by pathogens, and you just wipe them out, and you don't have diabetes anymore. It's not that simple, but it is kind of hard. But I have diabetes too. I have cystic fibrosis diabetes, which is not mine's very mild, but it's but it still is. I mean, it was mild and was still there, and yeah. So anyway, so solutions to our health problems are never in supplements and medications and taking these things. It is always through diet and your environment first, and then you can use like some of those things to support healing if they are effective, but no one who is healthy because they are using these medications chronically. We are sold those products as a way through exploitation of our illnesses, and they're not the solution. They're just meant to make people money. So anyway, yes, DHT can't aromatize. Oh, Elliot, sorry, it's been a while since you asked your question. What are the best things to do the morning after a poor night's sleep? Eat food, basically. Eat a lot of sugar, a lot of carbohydrate, lots of fruit, tons of fruit, lots of potassium. Potassium is one of the best sleep promoters. And a lot of people don't understand that they're not getting enough potassium to support their metabolic health. For instance, a cup of wheat flour only has, I think it's about 50 milligrams of potassium in it. There's really like no potassium in bread and pasta and wheat, and in a lot of other grains are very poor. Root vegetables, for instance, like a sweet potato, in a cup of sweet potato has about 600 milligrams of potassium. And we need around 5,000 milligrams, 5 grams of potassium a day. And so if your food is based on grains and meat and dairy, like you're not even coming close to the amount that you need every day. So if you instead eat a lot of root vegetables or legumes like a cup of beans, black beans, for instance, has something like 2 grams of potassium in just a cup. So so diets that are based on grains and meat and dairy are very deficient in potassium. And so if you're not sleeping well, like you should look at your potassium intake. And you can even use a potassium citrate supplement to boost your potassium levels more easily too. Yeah, so get vitamin C, get lots of fruit, lots of sugar, and then also try to increase your sources of potassium dramatically. And that should help as well too. So yeah, okay, so continuing. You lost your hair. You start to think that benzoate, and benzyl alcohol harm. So you take taurine to force the liver to excrete those toxins. Yeah, but I mean, do you take things that have benzoates in it? Because you should just avoid those in the first place. Sometimes I get people asking, for instance, okay, so like in my book, I talk about how thyroid disease is caused by polyunsaturated fatty acid dilution of iodine, because iodine saturates unsaturated fatty acids, the bonds on unsaturated fatty acids. That's one of the ways in which using iodine can help you get better in a lot of ways. But then after that, someone asked me if they could use iodine and not have to worry about their polyunsaturated intake. And no, that was not the right lesson to take from that. So you shouldn't be using supplements to make up for the presence of other harmful things. You need to get rid of those harmful things in the first place. They're in the vials containing the anabolics. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, like I've been doing this for about 8 years now and helping a lot of people, and not once have I ever gotten anyone on steroids. To be clear, like if you have a health emergency and you go to the hospital and you need to be given steroids, like that's totally okay. And it has stressful effects, but you need to go through that. But like I would not be using these Sogo. Oh, when you said prog, I thought you said, sorry, I said pregnenolone, but I think you said progesterone. And you're male though, Sogo, it sounds like. Yes, progesterone would make you gain fat. Progesterone, that's why like women are softer and have more fat on their bodies, is because they have higher levels of progesterone. Progesterone will make you gain fat, even though it also raises your metabolic rate if you use a lot of it. So that's not really the best conclusion to do. I wouldn't really focus on taking any of those, Sogo, unless you really are ill and need to. You need to instead focus more on your diet and your environment. Are you getting sunlight every day, not just 15 minutes of sunlight? Do you have vitamin K and vitamin C and fruits and vegetables in your diet every day, and enough potassium and all those nutrients that I talk about in my book? That is how you get better, not through the use of steroids and supplements. I know a lot of these forums do that, and they do sort of like, they like to fancy themselves, and contributors like to fancy themselves as biohackers. But in reality, they don't really understand how the body works. My book and my work is the best biohacking that you can possibly do. And biohacking is not done through taking steroids and supplements. There are way too many things in our body for those to be effective. So yeah. So progesterone makes you softer. And so like when I had cancer, I used progesterone to increase my metabolic rate, but it did not help me lose weight. In fact, it made me gain a little bit of weight. But it brought my metabolic rate up really high and promoted my thyroid function so that I could get better from cancer. And then after that, I lost weight, not using progesterone, but by supporting my endocrine system and consuming plenty of the nutrients that support respiration. Progesterone was a therapeutic hormone to promote better thyroid and respiration pharmacologically, which then when you support, because so progesterone isn't harmful for men to take at all, but it will downregulate your testosterone. So one of the reasons that you gain weight on it is because it actually lowers both your testosterone and your DHT, dihydrotestosterone, the active form of testosterone. And so that makes you softer and gain weight more, just like women do. And you only use progesterone if you need to, like if you have cancer or severe thyroid disease or something like that. And if you don't have those conditions, then don't use it. But I also would not use the other hormones. So the other hormones would be also interfering with your trying to regrow your hair, because hair regrowth needs to be supported through the niacin, through the kynurenine pathway that I talk about in my book. And if that's not being supported and you use anabolic hormones, your hair loss will get worse. So, and it's because so I talk about it in this in the book, and it's why a lot of people think incorrectly that DHT contributes to hair loss, because anabolic androgens, the more potent androgens, make men's hair thicker, and that makes our hair stand up and be more coarse. And it's why it's really common basically for every single male hairstyle to be high, like piled higher on the head. And that is because male hair does that naturally more than female hair. And that is one of our sexually dimorphic features that are equivalent to other sexual dimorphic characteristics in other animals. Like, for instance, like male lions have a big mane, right? And female lions don't. Human males, our hair standing up taller is a marker of maleness and virility. It's one of, just like our larger forearms, it is a biological dimorphic characteristics of one sex and the other. And that is achieved through hormones like DHT. And that does place an increased demand on the nutrient requirements for hair growth in men, but that doesn't cause hair loss. The problem behind hair loss is those pathways that supply those nutrients failing. So the pharmacological approach to do that is to take finasteride, which destroys DHT, but that also does not stop hair loss, because the thing causing the hair loss is the problems behind the failure of the kynurenine pathway. That's why you see people like Hassan, who has been on finasteride for God knows how long, still losing hair, because his diet and other behaviors don't support hair regrowth, don't support the kynurenine pathway. But anyway, so your use of those steroids could potentiate hair loss, and that's also why why the Liver King lost all of his hair, is because he's not doing, his diet and philosophy does not support human biology. At no point in our history as human beings have we ever consumed raw meat like the way that he promotes. That we have never had teeth to do that. We evolved from creatures that lived in trees. We ate mostly fruits and nuts, and we evolved into the humans we are through then consuming like shellfish and forageable insects and shellfish. Like our meat source was insects. It wasn't like meat. We didn't start eating meat until like we probably discovered meat as a food resource by foraging after wildfires. And you'd come across an animal that had died that also got cooked during wildfire. And cultures like the Aborigines in Africa, Jesus Christ, I'm stupid, in Australia, they still practice traditions they still practiced these traditions of burning fields and forests in order to capture prey. Instead of, they would hunt them too, but they also used fire as a way to actually chase out and capture animals for consumption. There's a really great documentary series on Netflix called Cooked with Michael Pollan that I recommend watching that kind of talks about this. Anyway, the Liver King just doesn't understand human biology at all. And I totally get the misconception. A lot of us as humans want to view ourselves as these like predator warrior types. And while we did eventually start hunting like big game, that's not why we evolved into humans already when we were doing that. The thing that made us humans was actually foraging in shallow water, around ancient Lake Megachad in Africa, while we were evolving on a diet of nuts and fruit and plants and insects and shellfish and things and crustaceans that you could forage in the shallows around in lakes like that. So anyway, so like people that promote these hormones and supplements like this and these lifestyles, like the reason it doesn't grow your hair back is because it doesn't grow your hair back. Like it doesn't work. So you have to really understand those pathways. And that's why my book is really the best biohacking book out there, even though a lot of it is still just based on nutrition, because that is how our body works. You can't actually biohack biology. You have to work with biology. You cannot make it do things it doesn't want to do. If you do that, it actually throws off other pathways. And there are so many pathways in our body that it's impossible to understand the consequences of doing things like taking steroids long-term, because it throws everything else that's dependent and fed by those pathways out of whack generally. So yeah, that was a long answer to that, but yeah. Let me see. Did I miss anything else? Yeah, you want to ask about, if you have gum disease, you can wipe it out with ceftriaxone pretty easily, but you will get it right back if you kiss anybody that has it too. So it's not really effective in resolving that if you don't avoid it again in the first place. You have to follow the other instructions in my book for resolving oral disease in order for it to be persistent. So Elliot, you do the whole Ray Peat diet, mostly fruit, milk, gelatin, egg, shellfish, and since brought vegetables. Good, yeah. But Elliot, that is not the Ray Peat diet. there is not really a Ray Peat diet. What you're describing is mostly forum participants' interpretations of Ray Peat's work. And, on the event of his death now too, there's a lot of people are asking me more questions about his work and stuff like that. And one of the things that people don't really understand about Ray Peat and his work is that what is not often shown when you consume that information from places like forums where you're getting it through third parties is the absence of context. So a really great example of this is how a lot of people have chosen to completely avoid vegetables because of things that Ray has said about cellulose and phytic acid and things like that. And that's not the lesson to have derived from that. But even Ray did also even say things like he did not eat vegetables, or like he cut back on them or something, but then he started eating them again. And unfortunately probably didn't do that soon enough. And because then Ray also talks ad nauseum about the functions of vitamin K and vitamin E. And where do you think you get those nutrients? Like, we do not get vitamin K from supplements. We get them from leafy green vegetables. And it is so vital in so many metabolic pathways that if you don't eat vegetables, you don't get vitamin K. And you cannot make up for that deficit with a supplement. It just does not work the same. Part of the reason is that our own gut microbiome requires vitamin K excess in order to survive. So if you don't eat vegetables, your commensal microbiome dies off and pathogens move in. And then you have to handle that with antibiotics, except that doesn't work either, because there's a lot of antibiotic resistant pathogens like C. difficile that can move in and cause really horrible metabolic side effects. So that is not really the Ray Peat diet. There's not really a Ray Peat diet. He does talk about these foods positively sometimes, but that is a forum diet. Obviously I'm biased to my own work and opinion, but I think that my book has maximized the information gleaned from Ray Peat in a way which is actually useful. Ray was really good at pointing out inconsistencies and problems, but not very good at establishing solutions. He'll have a whole article about estrogen and cancer, and all the problems with estrogen and cancer research. And then at the very end, he'll just say, and eat some fruits and vegetables and take pregnenolone. And that's not very comprehensive. It's great at pointing out the problems. So when I did my work, I started from Ray Peat's work, and then from there went to go find solutions that were based on a lot of that knowledge. And so anyway, so I would recommend that so you said though, you got my book and so you're eating vegetables and stuff. So I'm mostly saying this for other people that listen to the podcast, not really directly to you. Yeah. So, vegetables and tubers. And in my update, if you were listening, which is available, it's not finished, but you can go download it if you have a code still from the last one. I talk about a huge addition to the book is information on tannins and how they participate in our health, and how necessary they actually are. They used to be viewed as an anti-nutrient, but and they do bind to nutrients, but they don't actually promote nutrient deficiency like things like phytic acid do. They're actually really useful for our health. So sources of dietary tannin actually are really, really important for our health. So you can go download my book if you want. And a lot of that information is in the chapter on gut health, mostly. And I also arranged some of the chapters are in different order. But I'm still working on it too, so keep an eye out for my next update that actually officially comes out, so you can get that. So go. You think progesterone blocking cortisol receptor would make you bigger and healthier? Yes. Yes. When we are deficient in progesterone but pregnenolone mostly, not so much progesterone, we express more cortisol. And cortisol actually, when you say bigger, do you mean fat or muscular? Because I've had both from both progesterone and pregnenolone promoting both fat gain but also muscle bulk increase. Actually, taking pregnenolone, actually both, really just promoted normal, like really significant anabolic effects, and I just like got bulkier, muscly, more muscly, but not ripped though. But I wasn't lean at all. I mean, I'm not lean right now either. I've been experimenting with infectious pathogens for the last 4 years. I'll get lean in the future when I'm done with this. But yeah. High cortisol expression is why men and women, but men are very often more focused on muscle building. High cortisol production due to high stress behaviors and dieting cause muscle loss. And a lot of men think it's really difficult to put on muscle, but it's not at all. The only reason it's difficult is because you have high cortisol expression. For instance, unfortunately, I like marijuana, but when you smoke marijuana, it actually stimulates your cortisol release. Because in part, one of the ways that pot makes you relax is that it actually blocks adrenaline. And so it makes you feel relaxed. But because it blocks adrenaline, it also blocks your ability to release glucose from glycogen storage. I always say that in the reverse order. It also blocks your glucose release from glycogen storage. And so then that raises your cortisol expression. And then cortisol catabolizes lean muscle into usable sugars and amino acids. And that's part of why pot can actually be an analgesic and help with pain management and stuff like that. Is because when you smoke pot, it's a lot like you're like smoking steroids, basically. But that also prevents muscle growth. But also, just not eating enough and not getting enough sunshine, and not having enough sugar and enough protein, those all can stimulate muscle catabolism. And so you can, as a male, because we have high testosterone production, or if you're a transgender male, you can just grow muscle spontaneously without even working out. And that is achieved by lowering your stress hormones through methods like I talk about. There's a whole chapter in my book. It's called Free Muscle. Talks about all the parameters that promote muscle growth. And if all of those are true, you just spontaneously grow muscle as a male. You don't have to really work out for it. You can work out for it too. And if you're also working out and doing those things, your progress is extremely rapid. And it's actually not hard to build muscle at all. So anyway, Elliot, you were wondering if there's anything different you should do the next day if you've had a bad night. Oh wait, I already answered that one. I keep skipping around, so I missed them. Yes, pregnenolone will lower high cortisol the next day. You can take that to lower cortisol. Oh yeah, because I did end up mentioning that pregnenolone deficiency causes high cortisol. Actually, one major symptom of pregnenolone deficiency is social anxiety. If you have a party or gathering you're going to go to and you feel really anxious about it, that is indicative of a pregnenolone deficiency. Also, if you are fatigued at the end of the day, especially if you don't have a stressful job, physically stressful job, that is also a symptom of pregnenolone deficiency. And you can supplement 25 to 50 milligrams of pregnenolone every morning. For pregnenolone to be effective, you have to use it before you run out, not after. If you just supplement after you run out, it doesn't really do anything. So it's actually better to preemptively supplement it to prevent a deficiency in the first place, and then also fix your diet so that your body is making enough pregnenolone, as I talk about in my book. So, hey, Care, nice to see you. We just had a really long stream. I don't know if you're here for all of it. So, but nice to see you. We're almost wrapping up. So keep asking questions because when they run out, I'm going to end soon. Attend to my cake that I'm making. Skin looseness against the body structure, a sign of pathogenic bacteria. Maybe, yeah, sometimes. The skin actually, and I wanted to mention this when I was talking about skin cancer. The real reason that skin cancer happens is because the skin has its own metabolism separate from the rest of the body. When we are metabolically stressed out, circulation gets cut off from the skin because the body doesn't want to lose heat to the environment. So the skin is designed to catabolize itself in order to sustain itself in the absence of robust circulation. And when that is sustained over a long period of time through long-term dietary or environmental stress, that's where skin cancer really comes from, is because the circulation is so poor to the skin. So that causes hypoxia and also deprives the skin of the nutrients that are required to resist, like, say, UV radiological damage. And so improving your circulation to the skin by raising your metabolic rate and reducing stress hormones can fight skin cancer really easily, but also promote skin quality. And then a lot of people who have weight, who have like you'll see in a lot of people who had a substantial amount of weight loss will sometimes have really loose skin. And then they'll get it like surgically removed, which is unfortunate because that really that actually just removes cells from your body that won't necessarily grow back. And unfortunately I've never had the opportunity to directly treat anybody, or not. I don't treat people, but advise people on this stuff. But I suspect that the reason for that skin looseness is because of that same function. And especially though, because most people who do lose a significant amount of weight like that usually do it through stress methods like dieting and exercising. And the problem is that those behaviors only amplify stress hormones and they don't lower them. So then the skin never actually regenerates because the weight loss method was through stress hormone promotion. And so I think the opposite, like promoting skin tightening and rejuvenation, is to basically just follow the metabolic instructions in my book to raise the metabolic rate, and then that can help promote skin circulation, which could probably then regenerate and tighten skin like that. But yes, the skin very specifically is designed by nature to survive separately from the rest of the body, because it specifically gets deprived of blood flow when you have elevated stress hormones. Because the point of those stress hormones in part is to constrain heat to the core of the body to prevent its loss to the environment. And so reversing that situation by lowering stress hormones and raising circulation would regenerate and rejuvenate skin. There are specific nutrients, both iodine and zinc, I have seen to specifically have direct effects on skin quality. For instance, older people who take zinc who start taking zinc as a supplement will have like a period of like a week or 3 afterward where their skin starts to slough off a lot. Like it gets really crackly and dry and then starts to just fall off. And then afterward, it looks a lot more youthful. And that's probably through, I don't really know, but that one's probably through zinc's promotion of vitamin C recycling. And then vitamin C helps to recycle and control iron. And the skin is a major excretory route for iron. So the more you age, the more iron builds up in your skin, and then excess iron in your skin can depress its metabolic rate. And so I think the pathway through that function is that zinc helps to restore normal iron homeostasis in the skin, which then regenerates it and causes it to be more youthful. And specifically when I use iodine, and I've had other people mention this too, it like kind of softens the skin and also increases its hydration. So getting a low dose iodine supplement to support that would be useful. Incidentally, actually, here you guys might enjoy this little tidbit. So I was doing some more research adding to my book, and in my book I mentioned there's a part when I am talking about iodine deficiency, I think in the chapter on hypothyroidism, where iodine deficiency causes goiter, which is where the thyroid enlarges, and it does so in order to try to capture more iodine because iodine is so insufficient. And in the early United States, the entire range of the northern states, like from Montana to Vermont, and down to like Mississippi, probably even, where it was called the goiter belt, because it's called the Rust Belt now because of steel production. But back then it was called the goiter belt because so many people had goiters. And the goiters were enormous too, like huge growths. If you should look up picture, like search like vintage goiter photograph. They're so disgusting. It looks like you've got a whole new like person growing out of your neck. And so it was called the goiter belt because it was so prevalent. It was something like 30% of the population had goiter. And that's specifically caused by iodine deficiency. And I just parroted this explanation for it, which has been what's traditional. So and famously too, this is why salt is iodized, because iodine was added to salt in order to address the widespread incident of goiter around, not just in the United States, but also around the whole world. And the excuse for why this was so prevalent in the northern United States was that after the glaciation periods of the ice ages, glacial runoff leached all of the iodine, most of the iodine out of the soil there, and so the soils around there are low in iodine. And I parroted that in my book because I didn't think too much of it, and I didn't think it was really that consequential. Hey, Word, nice. Oh, and hi, Avosage, and nice to see you guys. I just parroted that because I didn't think it was consequential, but it actually is in terms of like farming and where iodine is supposed to come from. So I realized when I was writing this update and I was revisiting that's not true about glaciation leaching iodine out of the soil. Before white Europeans colonized the United States, there were millions of Native Americans living here, and they did not have goiter. So why did the white European colonizers end up getting goiter? It's really interesting too, because European colonizers in the South ended up developing a disease called pellagra, which is a deficiency of niacin, because their diets consisted largely of corn. And because white Americans committed genocide against the Native Americans and wiped them out, they didn't know about a lot of the things that they needed to know in order to survive here, and which Native Americans were doing incidentally through their practices. So Native Americans for a long time knew that you had to treat corn with lime, which not the fruit lime, it's calcium hydroxide. Lime in construction and in geology means limestone, not like the fruit lime. So if you ever buy corn tortillas at the store, it'll say lime on the package. That does not mean the fruit lime. It means like limestone, like lime, which is calcium. and Native Americans knew that you had to treat corn with lime in order for it to be digestible. But because white settlers killed off all the Native Americans, they didn't know that, and they were growing corn and eating the corn. And they develop pellagra and niacin deficiency because our bodies are not able to metabolize the niacin in corn unless it is processed through nixtamalization is the word for it. So in the northern part of the country, though, so Native Americans didn't have goiter, but all these white European colonists come in and they end up getting goiter after displacing the Native Americans. And yes, the soil is lower in iodine, but the Native Americans didn't have goiter, and they weren't like supplementing their diet with like iodine. Like that wasn't possible back then. It wasn't even possible to get like seaweed, really. Like you could if you lived on the shore, but they weren't like trucking seaweed up to like, the northern to the center of the continent. The reason that white European settlers got goiter, and one of the reasons why to this day why we have iodine deficiency, is because of modern farming practices. So Native Americans did not have work livestock. Like they did not have cattle and horses, and they did not plow the land when they planted crops. And they did plant crops too. In fact, this is a very often misunderstood reality about Native Americans is that they had established communities where they had towns and villages and farming regions. And they are misrepresented in a lot of our historical textbooks because of people that are embarrassed by the fact that we committed genocide and want it to be buried in the annals of history. Native Americans did farm, and but they did not till the soil when they farmed. They would plant beans and squash and corn and sunflowers and pumpkins. I mean, those I don't even know the full breadth of all the ones that they planted, but they didn't till the soil. But American colonists did. We had big iron steel plows and huge cattle and horses, and we would till the soil. And guess what? Iodine evaporates to the environment. This is actually really funny because there's also this sort of old wives' tale anecdote that you can paint iodine on your skin. If you've ever heard that, have any of you ever heard of the iodine test? You can. They said that you can paint iodine on your skin, and the rate of its evaporation indicates whether or not you're iodine deficient. Turns out this is total bull honky. It's not true. Iodine evaporates to the environment, so its rate of evaporation from the skin depends on environmental humidity. And iodine evaporates to the environment. So if you're tilling the soil in a place that has low iodine soil content, all that iodine is just evaporating out of the soil to the atmosphere. So none of the plants are taking it up. So then you get goiter deficiency. And I was bothered by this for a long time because I didn't like the idea that we needed to use an iodine supplement in order to get enough iodine, right? Really, are we really just supposed to be eating a lot of seaweed all the time? Well, then how did, a lot of our ancestors lived on the interior of continents and didn't they had working thyroids and stuff like that. The reason is because contemporary farming practices cause iodine loss to the atmosphere because they till the soil. And it doesn't help too that tilling the soil also actually kills off the local microbiome. And the soil microbiome is actually how a lot of plants get their nutrients. Plants, and a lot of people don't understand this, plants cannot just de facto absorb nutrients from the soil. They're not capable of it. What plants do is they give bacteria in the soil sugar, and then those bacteria produce acids from that sugar, and then those acids dissolve the minerals that are in the soil and rock and dirt. And then those acidic elemental complexes that result from acid formation there then make those nutrients bioavailable for the plant, who can then take them up into the roots. And so I don't know if that specifically relates to iodine, but it might. But that's also why a lot of food nowadays, even though we especially in the United States, we get really fixated on growing giant foods and huge produce. Jesus Christ, the grocery store that I go to here, they started having these carrots that, I'm not kidding you, were bigger around than a baby's leg. They're so fucking thick. I couldn't believe it. I've never seen a carrot that big before. They're almost as big as a sweet potato. We're obsessed with size, but even if these plants grow big, it doesn't mean that they're very nutrient dense, and very often they're not. And that's one of the reasons why we have these nutrient deficiencies in the first place. So the iodine deficiency that is relative for the development of glandular cancers and thyroid disease and all these other problems comes from even organic agriculture does this, because organic agriculture is not necessarily healthier for us. It is better because it doesn't have the presence of chemicals, but tilling the soil and destroying the microbiome causes iodine loss from the soil. And so these plants, our normal sources of iodine, which would be plants in our diet, we are not getting them because of this stuff. Ironically, actually, dairy can sometimes be a source of iodine because iodine is used to clean the teat of a cow, and so you incidentally get some iodine in there. So very often, you can grow up with a dairy-based diet and be getting iodine, but not because it's actually in the soil, but because it's actually being introduced through dairy through disinfection of the cow's teat during milking. So basically, we would normally be getting plenty of dietary iodine from fruits and vegetables, but it gets lost from the soil because of tilling inappropriate practices. And this also, I've been talking kind of ad nauseum about this, but this is also actually relevant for our entire history as a human species. there throughout the ages, there have been centers of human civilization that eventually fail. And a lot of times, like Egypt and the Middle East and Rome, like Babylon and Persia and Rome as well. I didn't mean to say that Rome was in the Middle East, but I was including in that list. We think of the failure of those societies as being geopolitical. But in fact, a lot of it is because of the failure of agricultural soil around those areas. And it's responsible too for a lot of our established practices in traditional agriculture, such as crop rotation, letting fields go fallow, doing things like that. And planting cover crops. All of those things are actually they work, or oppositely, the nutrient deprivation from soil is caused by destruction of the microbiome through practices like monoculture, like white European colonists practiced. When Europeans killed and displaced the Native Americans that lived here, after moving them onto reservations forcibly, they also forbade them from practicing traditional polyculture agriculture like they were doing. They would not let Native American women plant it's called the Three Sisters grouping. So they would plant beans, corn, and squash all together in one like plot. Or like immediate, like you'd plant one of each together and then go down and plant another one of each together and so on. Because the beans fix nitrogen into the soil, which also helps the other two grow. And that was like a traditional practice. And white Americans would not, the government and military would not let them do that, and forced them to practice monoculture. And the tillage of the ground and practice of monoculture is what caused the goiter belt and iodine deficiency that persists to this day in places like the United States. Because that is not how plants grow. And that's where a lot of our nutrient deficiencies come from. And if you've ever heard of like regenerative agriculture, that's like a really great, but that will get bastardized too. You'll have big agro industry who will come along and claim that they're doing regenerative agriculture and try to regulate it and certify it. But the certification will, like, for instance, like organic certification in the United States right now only requires organic foods to be something like 75% organic. Like, they don't even have to be 100% organic to say they're organic officially. There's funny, someone told me the other day, so a lot of like organic animal products right now are being fed on organic, quote unquote, supposedly organic grain coming out of places like Turkey. Turkey is being run by a dictator right now who is jailing journalists and running their economy into the ground. And several years ago, miraculously, just out of nowhere, Turkey started exporting something like 10 times the amount of organic grain that they were the year before. And it wasn't because they were actually producing organic grain, but it's officially certified and it's being shipped over to the United States and being given and being fed to cattle and other animals, so that it's certified organic, but it's not actually organic. So anyway, that was a really long diatribe, but that's like where these problems are coming from, and why we have iodine deficiency, and why that cause, and then why you get cancer. Like, because if any of you who weren't here earlier, I mentioned how like iodine deficiency contributes to glandular cancers, like cancer of the breasts and prostate and stuff like that. And that is caused by, there's not enough iodine like in iodized salt to prevent that. So in the interim, you have to, it does help to like take a supplement of that. But in the long term, we all need to hold our elected representatives accountable for our food production. A lot of you probably don't even know this. There's like only one company called Cargill that owns most processed food in this entire country. You see all these brands in your store of like, frozen and processed foods, and you think they're all different. No, they're all owned by just one company that has major political power and forces all of these kinds of things onto us. And it's people like that and politicians both on both sides, all parties that are responsible for this environment that causes us to be having these health problems at young ages increasingly, like we're going through, like I went through, and like this boy, young guy that I've been coaching with his stage 4 leukemia, because of these very problems. So you can take control by being very knowledgeable about where your food is coming from and supplying those nutrients that aren't there. But also, long term, we need to elect honest and responsible representatives that can take care of our interests instead of business. As a little as a little advice for that, politicians that take corporate donations are not those people. Corporations, just want to make money. That's their end all be all. This also goes, I'm really going on a tangent here. This also hits at like genetically modified food. So I have a lot of friends who I will see champion genetically modified food because they're pro science, because they're liberalish, and they're for science, so they're automatically for genetically modifying food. But the whole purpose of genetically modified food is not for our health. It's to increase the profit margins of the companies that own those patents. It has nothing to do with science. It has everything to do with corporate profits. And by default, that means that it is not expressly interested in our own well-being, health. So you've got to be knowledgeable about this stuff and pay attention and elect people who are have integrity and don't accept corporate donations and are champions of the working class and stuff like that. Those are the people that we send to office that will help to re-regulate better, more productive agriculture. And people that work in agriculture too, like they very often side with against their own interests too. Even there's such rampant obesity in the agricultural industry, and it's because the use of toxic pesticides and herbicides kill off your gut microbiome, and then pathogenic and opportunistic organisms move in and derange your metabolic rate. And the reason you're unhealthy is because of the use of those chemicals. But if you learn how to do regenerative agriculture, which is more fun anyway and pretty and nice and produces the most incredible tasting food. I have a friend up here in Utah who has a farm, and he gave me some turnips last spring when I was there, and they were the most incredible vegetable I've ever tasted. They were so buttery and amazing, and it's not possible to find those at a normal grocery store where your produce is coming from overseas, because they're just never going to have that kind of quality nutrition, because that's not the point. They're not interested in giving you nutrition. They're interested in just maximizing their profits. So anyway, sorry. You guys have asked a lot more questions than I saw last. Okay, so we got a loose skin. Topical Progecy be a helpful addition to the hair loss protocol in your book? Elliot, probably a little bit, but no, it's not a major thing. Like, you could use that. It raises thyroid, but that's not going to be a major thing. Like, there's the chapter on niacin therapy is pretty specific about what you need to do that. And that's really all you need for that. So no, Progecy would not directly promote hair regrowth for a specific reason, but it would help potentiate the kynurenine pathway as long as all the other requirements for that are there. So, Care, what's the most interesting thing you've learned about parasites? The sheer fucking amount of them. like here, especially here in the United States, we talk about parasites as if they're not really a problem. There are over 300 species of nematode alone that infect human beings. And those are just the nematodes, not to mention the amoebas and I've been talking too long. I can't even remember all of the other different varieties. The protozoa, the amoebas and protozoa, and like there are so many. There is a parasitic algae called blastocystis that a lot of people have, and it's also not killed by chlorine. So it can infect your drinking water, and you can just drink it. And a lot of, especially like the southern United States are full of obesity and diabetes, and mental health problems. And it's all because of parasites. Like there is such widespread distribution of parasites in our country, because our diets are so poor in supporting our immune systems, not because of a lack of sanitation. It's because sanitation cannot account for them all. There was a report recently of a man who got a brain-eating amoeba from swimming in a reservoir in a reservoir in Texas. Reservoirs accumulate snails and other mollusks that are vectors for the kind of parasites that can actually infect us and kill us, because those reservoirs actually destroy the local populations of freshwater prawns, which would normally consume mollusks and keep their populations in check. That wouldn't eliminate parasites, but it would greatly decrease their distribution. And since their distribution is increased, even swimming in reservoirs increases your chance of exposure. But again, too, that's not really the problem either, although it is part of the problem. The real problem is that our diets impair our immune system and ability to fight them. So literally, like, yeah, Kara, when I was doing all this research and on them, I just couldn't believe all of the ones that I just kept running into and finding out more new ones. And then like a new coaching client that I have was dealing with Lyme disease. And I was incorrectly talking about Lyme disease being a problem of parasites. The bacterium usually associated with Lyme disease I've been talking too long. It's a bacteria, but there is a parasite that is transmitted by ticks. And is associated with Lyme disease. While the bacterium causes Lyme disease, the ticks also spread a parasite. They're everywhere. There's so many, and there's so many different routes of transmission. And this isn't to gross anyone out. I know a lot of people are especially weirded out by parasites. You can rest assured that you have them. I mean, everyone has parasites. Like they're little. We are a major megafauna species. There are thousands of parasites that have evolved over the millions of years to target us and infect us. And you can be perfectly healthy while harboring parasites. It's really funny. The idea of thinking that we don't have parasites is so wishful. It's completely not based in reality. And because we Americans can also be especially delusional to our health and wanting to think that we are impervious to these kinds of things, we don't even look into it. But a lot of us actually have parasites, and you can get them so easily and from so many different sources. And you can get them just from food contamination. And in my book, I'm mentioning this, how like our country like exploits agricultural workers who get paid sub-poverty wages. They can't afford sanitary living conditions, and parasites get spread through poverty. And then we have people who are impoverished harvesting our food because we won't pay them enough to live in a healthy environment. And so our food gets contaminated with parasites and the eggs and stuff, and then we eat them. And restaurant workers not washing their hands can contaminate food. And like you literally cannot avoid it. Is completely impossible to avoid parasite contamination. But the problem is not exposure, really. The problem is that our diets and understanding of those medical realities are insufficient. So that's what the update talks about a lot. So, yeah. 901, how do females gain arm muscles? Like Pilates arm look. 911, like, a lot of people don't understand that women actually have a very high amount of androgens. Women have more androgens than estrogens, actually. My stream on endometriosis and PCOS kind of talks about that a little bit. And I think as a woman, okay, actually, so, and also a lot of people misunderstand how muscle is grown as well. Like a lot of people think of muscle growth as like going to the gym and working out and lifting weights. As an aside too, do you know where the term dumbbell comes from? A lot of people don't know this. So the reason that weights are often called dumbbells is because bodybuilding and weightlifting originated in medieval Europe, when everyone noticed that the bell ringers of chapels were especially muscular, because you had to throw your whole body into that rope in order to get the bells to ring. So the term dumbbell means silent bell, right? Like it can't make sound. And so you were lifting dumbbells in order to get strong, just like the bell ringers who were strong and muscular. So ever since then, everyone thinks that muscle building is done through resistance exercise. It's not at all. The thing that actually grows muscle is the electrical stimulus to the muscle cell. That's what stimulates it stimulates muscle growth. And and I talk about this in my book. In my chapter on free muscle, I recommend this other book called Muscle Control. It was written by a guy named Maxick. His story is really adorable too. I highly recommend getting this book. There are people though who have been distributing this book along with the concept of isometric exercises. Do not get that one. That one is not the same thing. I don't know why they did that. It has nothing to do with his work. Just get the plain book. Because he wrote this in like the early 1900s. He's been dead for decades. But he was this really buff bodybuilder, really world famous bodybuilder, Maxick. And he talks about muscle control and how muscles actually grow. And that's how muscles grow. And so same with women, like it's the same thing with women, and you get that Pilates look because when you're exercising and contracting muscles, that electrical stimulus to the muscle is what grows muscles. So, but you don't even need to do that kind of physical exercise. That's what muscle control is about. Muscle control is just contracting the muscles without using weights. Your muscles have no idea how heavy the weight is you're lifting. You see people at the gym lifting heavier and heavier and heavier weight, trying to be tough and cool and like make progress. Your muscles have no idea how heavy the weight is. It's the contraction that causes them to grow, not the weight. You just have to have higher contraction impulses in order to lift the weight. So you can do that without the weight. And that's why muscle control is actually so great, especially because it doesn't risk injury the way that lifting heavy weights is. And let me tell you, especially you guys out there lifting heavy weight, just don't do it. I have hurt myself so many times. I dislocated a shoulder once in the middle of a I can't even remember what they're called. A chest press. It's been so long since I've been in a gym that I don't remember the terminology. A bench press. I dislocated shoulder once doing a bench press, and it hurt so bad, and the weight fell on me, and it was really embarrassing. But I injured myself so bad. You do not need to be lifting heavy weight, and it is so dangerous to be doing that. Muscle does not grow from weight resistance. It grows from electrical stimulation, and you can do that through the principles of muscle control, which actually work better too, and they don't cause muscle binding. A lot of you've torn your pec on the beach, yeah. Bench press, not beach. Oh my gosh, I have to go soon. I've been talking for too long. Weird. Somehow, for some reason, I'm noticing that chat stopped playing on the actual video of this stream. The last chat that's showing up on there on my screen was from a very long time ago. So if you are watching the VOD, all these questions are probably appearing in the actual YouTube chat replays. So just so you know that. Yeah. So muscles grow. So 911. So to develop your muscles too, as a woman, same principle. The only reason men get bigger muscles is because we have more androgens than women. But the same principles apply. So I would go read my chapter on free muscle and get yourself a copy of, also I really love muscle control because it's kind of like a meditative exercise. It's a lot like doing like real yoga, not like American power yoga, but like real, like meditative yoga. Cause the way it works is you focus your contraction attention just on like one muscle at a time. So it's really, really, really calming and relaxing as well as building muscle, and it's so effective. It's so effective that I don't even do it very much. Just doing it like twice a week, you'll get, and one of the reasons, and because of it too, like it helped fix a lot of my posture issues, because growing up having body dysmorphia and eating disorders and fasting and also working out excessively, a lot of my musculature was imbalanced, and also because I broke my left arm when I was in 4th grade. I fell off the monkey bars at school. That threw a lot of my muscle alignment out of whack, and muscle control really helps to put those muscles back in place. Because you are focusing on each muscle individually, it directly develops underdeveloped muscles. So muscle control is very therapeutic for your muscle health. So yeah. Elliot, if you take pregnenolone with marijuana, would that mitigate cortisol? No, it wouldn't. It would actually increase your cortisol probably. Because the production of cortisol is not a lack of healthy hormones. It's because marijuana directly inhibits adrenaline release. And yeah, I love marijuana too. I mean, but I really don't smoke it very much at all. I haven't even smoked it once this year. I'm only realizing now. The last time I had some was actually last year. But I do like to smoke it. It's fun to smoke and it makes me feel nice. But if you want to build muscle or anything like that, it will stop. I would say that if you like smoking pot, but you want to build muscle and be in shape, you should not smoke pot more than once a week, and not in high doses. Otherwise, it will just catabolize your muscle and make it much more difficult to do. And if you really need marijuana, also, there's a huge part of my book that focuses on addiction and substance abuse stuff. And I was working with somebody who had marijuana addiction, and they were having a really hard time coping with life and doing anything without smoking. And they wanted to stop, though. Like most people who are alcoholics and addicts don't want to be that way. We try stopping all the time. You can't just willfully force yourself. The reason that you have marijuana cravings is because you have deficiencies in other metabolic pathways that have to be addressed first. So we followed all the advice in my chapter on addiction and alcoholism, and now I think he's been completely clean now for like 2.5, 3 months with no marijuana, from smoking every single day. And that again, and a lot of addicts don't understand this. It isn't through willpower. He's not like suffering through not using marijuana. And this keeps a lot of people from getting sober. We instinctually recognize that these things are fun and they make us feel great. So the idea of giving them up gives us a lot of anxiety. But when you cure addiction, you don't even, like I just said, I didn't even realize that I haven't smoked pot once this year. Because my brain just doesn't even think about it ever. Because I just don't. And this is from somebody who used to be, I didn't use pot a lot. In fact, I gave it up about a year or two before I got sober from alcohol, because it was making me really paranoid. So it was a lot easier to give it up. But I was a kind of alcoholic that would drink an entire bottle of tequila in a single night. I thought that was a really great trick. And also, the last time I had a drink was actually early this summer. I had a 2 beers was the last time I had a drink. I just don't even think about it, because that's how the cure works. Is it cures you. You just don't even need the stuff. And then when you do have it, it's so much more fun because you're satisfied by small amounts. Smoking just one drag of a what do the kids call it these days? Just taking one drag of pot is enough for me to have fun. I don't even need a lot of it, because the cure is a cure. It's not just you're willfully powering through discomfort. That's not how it works. You do all the other steps that are required to supply the things that are missing that cause the addiction and the need for it in the first place. So it's easy to do. Sorry, I don't know if that's your real name or not. I can't pronounce that. As someone that struggles with severe social anxiety, what sources would you recommend for pregnenolone, and how would you feel about allopregnenolone? So pregnenolone, I've used a lot of different brands, Swanson, MRM. Usually they've all been pretty good, so I don't really have a specific one to use. But like I said earlier, it's most effective if you use it beforehand. So taking it if you have this as a problem, it's good to just take this all the time. But then when it comes to if you say, for instance, you have a party, you can take like 300 milligrams like 3 or 4 hours before that, and within about an hour your anxiety will go away, and when you go to the party you'll have a much better time. I've never used allopregnanolone. I don't know if you can buy that as a supplement. I also don't know that it has the same effects. I would only use pregnenolone. It's the one I have experience with and know about. And your body can convert pregnenolone into any other hormone that it needs. That's partly why it does this. It's because it's the master hormone of the body. It's the first one that's made in the cholesterol to steroid chain. And so it can be converted into any hormone that your body needs. So I would use pregnenolone. Yeah. And then to get your own pregnenolone working, you need dietary fats, carotenes, and dietary zinc, and sunlight. And if you're not getting enough fats or protein or zinc or sunlight, that interrupts your steroid synthesis, as well as the presence of like pathogens. And so you gotta cure your body of infection and increase your metabolic rate. And then you'll make your own. I actually haven't taken pregnenolone actually in like 2 years, because my diet now provides plenty. My body can make it now for the first time in a long time. So, word, is low ferritin good or bad or not meaningful on its own? Yes, low can be bad actually. Low and high are both bad. If you have low ferritin, but you do have iron in your diet, it's probably because your body you're harboring hydrogen sulfide producing bacteria, and that hydrogen sulfide chelates iron out of your body, which then lowers your ferritin levels. And so you can actually have an iron deficiency. I talk in my book a lot about iron excess, not so much about deficiency, in part because I didn't really understand how deficiency was working until I was researching hydrogen sulfide. And part of the way that reason that tannin is really helpful for us is because it protects iron from hydrogen sulfide. Excuse me. So that you don't get a deficiency, but it also prevents iron from being harmful and causing excess as well. So a lot of iron dysfunction I've come to find out is a lack of tannin in the diet. And one of the reasons for the traditionally attributed health effects of wine and tea and coffee and chocolate and nuts is because of their tannin content and how it regulates iron and other nutrients. So so that would be that. Care, drinking or swishing tea for reversing tooth decay? No, I wouldn't swish tea. Tooth decay is firstly caused by a deficiency of citrulline. So you're not getting enough watermelon in your diet, actually, or cucumber. Watermelon is higher in citrulline, but cucumber is the next highest, and cucumber is usually available year round. Because citrulline is converted into proline, which is then secreted into our saliva, which then sustains commensal microbes in between meals and also lowers their acid production. Tea probably can help to lessen or inhibit tooth decay. Actually, I did see a study not too long ago that tried to use a iron tannic acid, actually, funny enough, compound to seal up enamel erosion, and their study showed that it worked actually. So using tea could do that, but tannin can actually stain the plaque and tartar on your teeth and discolor your teeth. It's probably good for antibacterial effects actually, but it will make your teeth discolored. So I don't really know if the payoff is worth it or not. You can help to treat cavities just by eating sources of tannin and citrulline as well. So it's funny too, because I say now that we have a watermelon deficiency, because it's really apparent to me that we as a species actually evolved in part on watermelon, and that's one of the reasons why we have such a big brain. Cooking has a lot to do with it, because cooking releases a lot of nutrients, but the brain is the highest nitric oxide demanding organ in the body, and so it just goes to reason that in order to develop a very large brain like we have, you have to have an ample supply of citrulline. And we evolved in the same place that watermelon did, in Africa. And the reason watermelon is around is because of dinosaurs and other large megafauna that would eat large fruit like that and distribute it. And then we picked it up, and it's really funny too. I think I mentioned this in a stream, but like, and it's funny too because Avatar has just come out. But a lot of people are like, don't think that we already live in a world like Avatar, but we do. Like that's why we have watermelons. They're like enormous. They're way bigger than in proportion to us, to our bodies. Like we did not evolve. I mean, we did not. Watermelon did not evolve to be as big as it is because of us. It evolved to be as big as it was because it was also a food for enormous animals like dinosaurs. I don't know specifically dinosaurs, maybe just Pleistocene megafauna, but like, you know, they were still enormous as well anyway. But I imagine dinosaurs, you know, well, I don't know when fruit evolved. I could be wrong about that, but at least maybe not dinosaurs, but definitely megafauna of other kinds. That's why it's so big, but that's why we have such big brains too. In part is because of our access to watermelon, which is really, really high in citrulline. And we have this we have what's called the arginine paradox, which is that even if you have an adequate supply of arginine, our body will not use it in certain pathways like endothelial nitric oxide production unless you actually also intake citrulline. And that's because it's a self-regulatory mechanism that is dependent on the environmental availability of citrulline, which came from the Cucurbitaceae family of vegetables, of fruits, which include watermelon as the most potent source. So yeah. Beta blockers effect on the body. They're horrible. Don't use them. Yeah, beta blockers block adrenaline. And when you block adrenaline, it raises, you're not using them, are you, Care? I've told this story actually in several streams. You should have heard this. So one time I was approached by a woman who was feeling very terrible, and she wanted some help. She didn't sign up for coaching. I usually appreciate it if you compensate me for my time. But you know, she just asked a few questions for a while, and like it turned out she heard that adrenaline was bad, and so she was using beta blockers. And when you block adrenaline, you manually increase cortisol, because adrenaline is how our body releases glycogen from I keep saying that, releases glucose from glycogen storage. So if you take beta blockers, you can't release sugar into your bloodstream, so then you raise cortisol, which catabolizes your muscle, and that can also deteriorate your nervous system and other organs. So don't use them at all. Stay far away from them. So you've read Shining Red Light on Your Thymus, Vitamin K2 for Recycling White Blood Cells, item of infection, a chapter on infection, if I remember correctly. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Red light can help stimulate thymus regrowth. Only so long, though, as you also have other nutrients. Like, you have to also be making enough pregnenolone or taking it for your thymus to regenerate. K2 is necessary for that, and iodine also. Yeah, so... yeah, sorry, I did mention that you tore your pec on bench press. Does the hypothalamus brainstem irradiate some form of attraction? I'm not sure what you mean by irradiates. Or what do you mean? How does seduction work? I'm not really sure what you mean by that. I've never really looked into like science behind attraction, but like I do mention though that a lot of the things that we think of as being features of attraction are not necessarily. Like a lot of people talk about fitness a lot in terms of sex appeal. There is one aspect to human physical composition which is relevant, and probably the only one that is relevant for attraction. Attraction is often subjective. A lot of it is not biological. A lot of it is subjective. So you can, if you're raised in a culture that values leanness and musculature, then you will find it attractive as an adult, but that's conditioning, not necessarily biology. The one factor that I noticed that is actually involved in physical attraction is your eyes. When you get metabolically ill, the structures that hold the eye in place weaken, and your eyes actually fall back into your head. And so if you ever see like people who are dealing with like severe alcoholism and addiction or cancer, well, not really so much cancer actually, but like addiction and alcoholism, I often see it in where, or the reverse can happen too, actually, where, your eyes bulge out of your head a bit. That's from excessive metabolic stimulation and tightening of those structures. And then it makes you look funny because your eyes are like sticking out really far, right? But the opposite happens when you're metabolically torporific. Your eyes will actually fall back into your head, so people will have smaller looking eyes, like because your eyes keep your eyelids open when they're sitting in the right space, but when they fall back, your eyelids close more, so your eyes kind of dim and you can't really see into them very well. And like I noticed, because I noticed when I got better, when I came out of my cancer and I started having better metabolic rate, and I started going out and like having romantic encounters or erotic encounters, I noticed that this happened to my eyes, that like my eyes got bigger and they looked more bright and alive. But I hadn't lost any weight at the time. I was still fat, but like, God, boys were throwing themselves at me like just left and right. And they weren't before that. Before that, they were actually kind of ignoring me. And I thought it was because I was fat. But in fact, it was because my eyes were dull and dead inside. And it was because I was so fatigued, not fat. It was because I was so fatigued and also stressed from my life. Like, my partner leaving and losing my home and not having a place to live, and lost a lot of my friends, and was really emotionally stressed out a lot too. And then, so once I did a lot of the psychological therapy, like I talk about in The Perfect Child, I got emotionally better as well. And so my eyes brightened up, and which was supported by my nutritional effect. And once that happened, like, even though I hadn't gotten in any kind of shape at all, boys just started throwing themselves at me again. So like that's, so other things can contribute, like, like a lot of men like small breasted women. Like, I think small breasted women look cute. Like, small boobs are awesome. But like you can lose them altogether. And that's actually a function of pregnenolone. And so like boobs and, other things like that can be markers of physical health that may or may not impact your attractiveness. But also, like, you don't want to attract people that are into big boobs. Like, if you think that your attraction to other people relies on you having big boobs, you're just going to attract shallow assholes who only use you for your body, and that's really demoralizing and awful. So like, it's not something you need to like address, but it can be indicative of health problems that cause other health problems. And so, it's really more about feeling better rather than attraction. And of course, like, we all only need like one romantic partner. So, it's not really hard to find one if you are looking. And also just mental health. A lot of us do not realize how severely our past trauma affects our life experience, nor the trauma you're actually carrying around. That's one of the things I found from formulating the therapy in my book, Perfect Child, and which is about child abuse, is that it is impossible to be aware of the trauma you have, let alone how it affects your life. And a lot of our perceptions about sexuality, attractiveness, and how to function in partnerships is informed by trauma. And that's why we have a difficult time. If you are a male and you feel frustrated by your ability to find intimacy, it is far more a function of your trauma than it is how you look. 'Cause honestly, people have such low standards. You do not have to be very attractive to find sex. You really don't. I mean, you just like, it's just not. I am 42 and, I've got tons of gray hair and I am not ripped. And today when I went to go collect my groceries from the grocery delivery service, the boy who delivered them could not take his eyes off of me. And it was that fun little, like, you know, like I was like, oh, he's like checking me out. And I got like turned on, and I like almost like talked to him more, but it was fucking cold outside. And he also was like, he had to have been 15 years younger than me. So like sex and sexual attraction really has very little to do with what you look like. And it has, a lot of people do not understand just how much psychology plays a role in that. How you carry yourself has everything to do with the kinds and amounts of trauma that you have and that you harbor. It also limits your access. Like if you've ever felt that you just can't find suitable partners to date, like that is a big function of trauma, because trauma and your perception of life actually directs where you go and what you do with yourself. And so you end up being in the same places as people with similar trauma. So then in you, like somebody who's healthy, mentally healthy, is not going to be interested in somebody that is mentally unwell, let alone be in the same place as each other, usually. And I found this a big problem when I was younger. Like I'm 6'7", and at many times in my youth I was very fit, and I am very attractive, was very attractive, but I couldn't find anybody to date that was like what I wanted, like somebody who was good looking and nice to me, and you know, and had great sex and like, you know, everything that you want out of a relationship. I've constantly found myself having to settle for partners. And that reason was because what I was doing and where I was going to look for romantic encounters was all informed by my traumatic past, by the abuse that I suffered as a child and my perspective of myself and the world around me. That informed all of those decisions and what I thought I was capable of and where I thought my value was. So I ended up being around and associating with people that didn't care about me and that were not attracted to me for who I was, but because of what I looked like. And then I was fine with that because it made me feel excited when someone was sexually attracted to me. But then I ended up being with shallow narcissistic assholes who, like, you know, disparaged me to our friends and community and cheated on me and then just left me, you know, holding the bag at the end. So like, you know, attraction really just has such little to do with your physical appearance. Yeah, it has a lot more to do with your psychology. So, but the eyes, the quality of your eyes. Yeah. You said you experienced with T3. Yeah. Cause T3 increases your, oh, well, your eyes were red and angry. If you get red and bloodshot eyes, that's usually a indicative of some pathogenic agent that you have. I don't know which one, but you know, probably candida or C. difficile or something like that. So addressing those could help get rid of that. Because T3, a lot of people take too much T3, and then that can actually stimulate high stress hormones as well. And if you're harboring pathogens and having metabolic illness, then those effects can be exacerbated. So yeah, and yes, high metabolism can. So in this update too, I talk about how excess homocysteine overstimulates metabolic activity, and that drives excess consumption of nutrients, and that results from disruption to the transsulfuration pathway. And a lot of the etiology behind like panic eating and eating to excess is caused by disruption to the transsulfuration pathway through pathogenic organisms, interference in the B vitamins that participate in there, and that results in excess homocysteine. So yeah, like that those are all logical pathways that are involved in that. So okay, I'm gonna answer these last two and then we'll be done. Care, how do you view friends leaving when you become ill? It's happened to me. Yeah, happened to me too. Is there a layer of codependency to it, wanting my friends to save me? Oh, you're asking about from your, I was thinking about from your friend's perspective, because I mean, I guess I'm not bitter. I'm cynical that they weren't, but in hindsight, it was just indicative of what the kind of losers that I was hanging out with. People who were equally traumatized and alcoholic and stuff like that, who just didn't give a shit about my well-being at all. And I just found out about that by the fact that they didn't support me when I was sick, or my work. I can't tell you. I don't think a single person from my past that was a friend of mine has read any of my work at all. Not one of them has ever bought a book of mine or asked to get one, have a copy. And it's because of that same problem I was just talking about with romance. Because when you have an abundance of psychological trauma, it limits what you can do with your life and what you can achieve and where you go, and you end up associating with people who have similar trauma. And so that interrupts people's ability to relate to each other and to build real relationships and friendships and intimacy. So no, if you use your friends to get self-pity, that is codependency, yes. So if you are with people and you constantly talk about how hard your life is or the problems that you're having, and that's self-pity, and yes, that's codependency. Self-pity, though, is actually just a replacement for self-compassion, because you don't know how to have that for yourself. Compassion has never been shown to you in a meaningful way that you could learn how to have it for yourself. And that's what the inventory therapy accomplishes. The steps, the way you practice it, actually teaches you how to have self-compassion, which is different than self-pity. For instance, when we have self-pity, we have a terrible time accepting responsibility for our own behavior. For the longest time when I was younger, I did not want to accept responsibility for my alcoholism because I did not know how to handle it. I was never taught the skills required to do so. So my only option psychologically was to try to ignore it. And that's what happens in self-pity. In self-pity, we don't possess the skills that are required to provide those needs in a different way. And I don't shit on people that try to get self-pity. If you're that kind of person that talks about your problems but then doesn't listen to people who try to help you. I mean, this is a really common problem. When I encounter this all the time. When someone uses their platform or position or access, to me directly to talk about their problems, but then when I've had people hire me in coaching, that they then just all they end up using me for is a place to vent. And I don't want to fucking waste my time on that. I have a lot of things that I got to do with my time. If you don't want to get better, I have fired people from coaching before. Because there's no point to it. Like I'm not just going to sit here and listen to your problems. I am only interested in perpetuating my own work, which can be achieved by helping people. And if you don't even want to be helped, there's no point in signing up for coaching. But I've had people do that, though. They just sign up and then they just complain all the time. And then when I tell them what to do to address that, they get mad at me. And that's codependency. Yeah. But there's nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong with being sick, and there's nothing wrong with wanting people to help you and take care of you. One of the reasons I stayed with my ex for so long was because when I would get smashed and hungover, he'd always make me breakfast the next day. And that was the only time he ever cooked for me, was when I was hungover and sick and couldn't cook for us. And he was not a prolific chef, but he was really good. And his omelets were just so delicious. And so I loved getting hungover because then he would take care of me. And yeah, and that's a bit codependent too, actually. I mean, because that's what I was, right? I was codependent back then. The opposite of that is to say, hey, I love your omelets. Will you please make them for me? That's the opposite of codependence. I didn't need to get drunk to get him to cook for me. All I had to do was ask, but I didn't know how to ask. So I would make up reasons for it. No, there's nothing wrong. I mean, there's nothing wrong with you if your friends leave you and you're sick, or wanting help. No, there's nothing wrong with that. But it is harmful for personal relationships if you use other people to get needs that you should be providing for yourself. But you can teach yourself those skills. That's the thing. That's the big secret that I finally ended up learning, was that I didn't need to learn independence and confidence from other people. I could teach myself, but it had to be through a specific practice like inventory therapy. You don't get it through osmosis. A lot of people think of confidence as being an attitude you can adopt, and that's absolutely not it. You cannot will yourself to have confidence. When you do that, it's actually arrogance. Confidence comes from experience. And so you have to facilitate those experiences for yourself. It's not up to other people to do that for you. But we often feel very frustrated because we don't know how to do that for us. And then that's what my book, The Perfect Child, does. It teaches you, walks you through the process of how to actually do that. Because that's what I did for myself. So anyway, so you should read that. The inventory therapy is also in Fuck Portion Control, but The Perfect Child is more thoroughly covers experiences of abuse and trauma and dives deeper into that as well. So if you don't find that one to be as effective, or if you have an abundance of past trauma and, hardship in your life, I'd recommend Perfect Child for that. So, thanks, Sogo. All right. Well, thank you everyone for hanging out. I had a really nice time. I hope you did too. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and whatever you guys celebrate. I hope you're happy. If you are alone on the holidays, I'm alone on the holidays. Like I don't have family. They're all bigoted Mormons. It can be a really sad time of year. So remember to get light exposure, get yourself a light to perk yourself up, drink coffee, make yourself a cake, have fun, listen to Christmas music. My Christmas playlist is like 36 hours long. I can't even listen to all of it in a single day. Take care of yourself. It's okay if you're alone. Like, have compassion for yourself. Life is hard. People are traumatized. They often aren't able to help us. And, but it doesn't mean that you're worthless. You can find value. You can take care of yourself. You can be your own friend and your own family and your own parent. Anyway, love you guys. Thank you all for your support. I couldn't do this all without you. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button and share this with other people. And you can follow me on Twitter at Nathan Guy Hatch at Twitter handle. I can't talk anymore. It's about time that I go. All right. I'll see you guys all later.